Okay. Well, good evening and welcome to the Placerville City Council meeting of Tuesday, June 9th. Before we recess into closed session, wanted to open it up for any public comments on the closed session item.
Looks like we have no outside attendees to the meeting, Mayor, so I assume no public comment.
Okay, then we will adjourn to public comment or to closed session and be back at 6 p.m. Well, again, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, June 9th meeting of the Placerville City Council. Will everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Regina, do we have the flag? Okay, we'll start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started with tonight's meeting, and we will start with roll call.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Here.
Vice Mayor Thomas.
Here.
Councilmember Acuna.
Here.
Councilmember Borelli.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 3, announcements and presentations to the public. Item 3.1, review action of the El Dorado County Board of Supervisors and Public Health Officer regarding COVID-19 and provide direction to staff if necessary. And this is Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think most of this is somewhat old news for you because most of it happened last week. We did work with the county. Actually, the county prepared a letter and asked us to sign on to that. I worked with the mayor. He did sign on to the letter that went on to the governor requesting that we be allowed to proceed with some functions that were not currently allowed at the time. Actually, the same day that they prepared that letter, the governor released stated that there would be additional guidelines released along the lines of what we were looking for. And those are listed in my report. Specifically, I believe that was on June 5th, and he stated that more items guidelines would be open up to be entered into on June 12th. Those specific ones were hotels, campgrounds, tourism, card rooms, schools, day camps, film, TV, music industry, professional sports, gyms, wineries, bars, and museums. Some of those guidelines have now been released. I don't believe, last I checked, that they all have been. Hopefully by this Friday, the 12th, more will be, and most of those will be released at that time. The other thing that was requested in El Dorado County's letter was that the governor relax the provision for essential travel. In other words, I guess you call it unessential travel could be entered into at this time. I don't know that we've heard anything specific on that, but that was a request that was made in the county's letter. So at this time, we're continuing to monitor. I think we're doing well. I do believe the county has seen a few more cases, but there's a lot more testing going on here in Placerville area and essentially the Western Slope. I think we're doing very well. We have 7 cases currently in the city or in the Placerville area, not necessarily in the city. And to my knowledge, no hospitalizations on the Western Slope. There is 1 hospitalization countywide. So I think we're doing well. I think we, should continue to proceed cautiously and hopefully keep it under control the way we are doing now. And if you've been downtown in Placerville over the last couple of weeks, you'll see that generally, especially on the weekends, it's quite busy down there. It's good to see people downtown again. So if there are any questions of any of you, I'll be happy to answer those.
I'd just add that, again, in the letter that went over, and I know my colleagues have seen it, but for the public, again, this letter was a joint letter as well with City of Placerville, Martin Hospital, Marshall Hospital, and the city of South Lake Tahoe. So again, as a county, we were unified in this letter, and I think with much more impact and powerful into the governor's office. Any questions, comments?
Did we get any kind of response, acknowledgement or anything?
Not that I have heard, not yet.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Now taking public comment from Camille.
Good evening, Camille. Camille, you're still on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Camille Lloyd. Some of you may have heard of the petition that I started to consider taking down the Hangtown from the welcome sign.
Ms. Lloyd, right now we're on the COVID-19, but if you have something that's not on the agenda, it would be under item 7. If you would wanted to reconnect to item 7, unless this is related to the COVID-19.
Okay, I apologize. How do I find it?
It'll be item 7 on the agenda for public comment on non-agendized item.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now taking public comment from Jennifer Chapman.
Good evening, Jennifer. Jennifer, you there?
Mr. Mayor, let's move on to 846.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have this problem. I can't do the.
Oh, we just lost you there, Jennifer. There you go.
Okay, am I still there?
Yep, you're here.
Okay, great. Anyway, I won't explain. It's when I join, you're seeing the computer named Jennifer, and then 4846 is my phone because I can't make the audio work through my computer yet. I'm not sure why. I just wanted to say, or maybe ask a couple questions about, now, if museums are open, does that mean, say the Goldbug Park is open? I don't know if that would count as a museum, and then maybe even, the Arts and El Dorado gallery space. I don't know if that would count. And I guess I was going to ask about the El Dorado County Historical Museum, just as it relates to accessing archives, which I realize isn't the city, although the city might know or have an interest in that. So I was just wondering if those things are part of this next round.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. We'll try to get it answered for you on that.
Last call for public comment on 3.1. Now taking public comment from Maureen Dion Perry.
Good evening, Maureen.
Good evening. Am I unmuted?
You are.
I am. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad that we have done so well in keeping our COVID cases down, but I have to say I'm very concerned about the lack of wearing masks when masks have really been found to be effective. I personally won't eat at food establishments where the food preparers are not wearing masks. And I would really like to request that we have some stronger guidelines about the wearing of masks. I know it's a very controversial area, but I believe the science is there to support wearing masks. So I'd love to hear more about that from you and Dr. Williams.
Okay, thank you, Maureen.
No further public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. In terms of our Goldbug Park, Cleve, do you know, are we open? Or Mark may know as well.
We are not open yet. Goldbug Park, Terry, you could maybe address that. Goldbug is kind of a unique one. I don't know what exact category it falls in, but Terry, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I'm not considering that a museum, so I don't feel like it falls into the categories that that had been discussed at the county level about the state's staged plan. So there are some issues with Goldbug, specifically the vulnerable staff that we have. Most are over the age of 65. And we are trying to figure out when the right time to do that is, but there isn't any clean category for it. So we're trying to focus on making sure that we're open to folks that are our populations of people that come in we had a lot of school groups. Schools are still not running right now. And then some question about attracting folks from outside the area, just because we get a large amount of people from outside of our region and our county. So that's about all I can say about that right now. But we are still cautiously watching how things are going and are very interested in getting back to putting that in operation. The park itself, Goldbug Park, is open daily as far as the access to the outside areas, but the buildings, the stamp mill, and the gift shop and the mines are closed.
Thank you, Terry. And then in terms of the Historical Society in El Dorado, I think they would probably fall under this, but it would be up to them. Again, and I think as Terry mentioned, we do have a vulnerable population in most cases running those organizations as well. So whether or not they opened up yet, I'm not sure. I don't know, Cleve, if you have any information on that.
I don't, and I'm not aware that they've opened. They would fit in that category of museums. I'm not sure if I've seen the guidelines for museums yet. I don't know if any of you know, but that would be the key, is once those guidelines are out, they could consider opening, but it's still up to them. Nothing says that they have to, so.
Got it. And then in terms of the masks, I know, and I'd have to go through the guidelines again, but my understanding is that the food preparers is recommended but not mandated. It would only be for servers or staff that are within 6 feet of customers. So I know every restaurant has, looked at that differently. Kara, you may know a little more on this as well. But that was my understanding on masks for food preparers, unless they were somehow within a 6 feet radius of a customer. So I know I've been to restaurants that have had both. Personally, I'm okay either way, but I know we're going to have members of the public that, like anything, certainly can go to restaurant establishments that enforce that, or ones that don't. And again, I think it was a recommendation and not a mandate, but I'm not sure. Maureen, I'm happy to look into that and get more information, but certainly would also, you should definitely talk to the county health officer as well. But I think all those things have been taken into consideration as we've gone forward. And again, I think the important number there is not so much the amount of increases in confirmed cases, but the amount of hospitalizations and then recoveries. Those are the most important numbers, because we're going to find more people as we test more. But certainly understand your concerns on that, and just the need for people overall to wear masks in public. And I've been guilty of not remembering sometimes myself, but certainly I know my part to do as best as I can as well. But I don't know if anyone else has any other comments on that. Patty?
Well, I was just going to say, we keep hearing that the masks they're not to protect the people that are out there. It's to keep your own germs to yourself. And so I'm sorry, I forgot the caller's name, but what she's saying is that the food preparers are not wearing them. So to me, they would be the ones that make sense to have them wear them, so that they don't project any kind of, you know what I mean, it just, and I know there's no, there's no rules by anybody, but it just makes sense. And I'm going to suggest to her that maybe when she goes in these establishments and makes her, makes herself known and what she's talking about, that it might give them pause to, require them to wear these masks. So just a thought.
No, thank you, Patty. Any other comments? Okay, Cleve, thank you for the update. Obviously, every day and every week seems to be a completely something new. So I'm sure by the time we have our next council meeting at the end of June, this will be another changed world, because that's basically how we've been working over every 2 weeks or so. So to be continued, and we'll see where we're at as we go forward here. Okay, moving on to item 3.2, receive and file update on public records requests. And this is Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. This is just a quick update on the public records requests. We still have 2 that are in process. The request from the Wapumis tribe is ongoing, although we believe this will be the 4th and final set to be delivered later this week. And then the request below that, Mr. Smith, we should have his second production out by the end of the month. And since the staff report was submitted, we have received 2 more requests, similar in nature. One from Jennifer Chapman and the second one from Steve Mikesell. They were both received yesterday, and they are regarding documents from April of 1919 regarding the Clay Street Bridge. So we will respond to those accordingly. And that is all. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Regina. Just a quick, both of those PRA requests for the same issue?
One was regarding, one was regarding an article from the Mountain Democrat, I believe. And then the other one was minutes from April 1919.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Council, any comments for staff at this point? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Now taking public comment from 846.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. Hi there. You can hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. So no, just for clarification, those public records requests associated with the bridge project are going back to in the draft EIR, it states that the plans for the bridge were presented in April 1919 by, it says F.F. Fisher and A.S. Lyon. And we're trying to basically find out, more about what was going on. We understand F.F. Fisher was the fire chief and A.S. Lyon was involved in bridge building, appears to be connected to the Lake Tahoe Wagon Road. But in any case, it's limited information that's in the draft EIR. So we're trying to understand more about that. If you guys remember from last year's convoy exhibit at the museum, that year 1919 was the year the Army was coming out to kind of demonstrate just the road, that coast to coast road. Anyway, that's what that's about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Now taking public comment from call-in user.
Hello, City. Can you hear me?
We can. Good evening.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for all you're doing. Just wondering if this public records request at City Council meetings seems to have become a permanent feature. So going forward, if that's the case, then I appreciate the exposure, and I can think of all kinds of public records requests that would otherwise just be unknown to the public. But if you're going to offer this forum, I'd be happy to start thinking of all kinds of public records requests to get this awesome exposure. So thank you for the service. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Last call for item 3.2, public comments. I see no more public comments there, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from colleagues? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 3.3, which are brief comments by City Council. And we will start with Council Member Borelli.
Just very brief. I've been attending all kinds of Zoom meetings, really getting this thing down. And it's really been kind of convenient because I feel like I've really gotten to experience more than I would have if I was having to bodily attend them. And also I just offer my tons of thanks to everything that our police department did in the wake of the what we thought maybe might be a little catastrophic on the back, what was going on with the funeral, etc. And I just want to say how well it was handled. And I'd just like to thank also our public for doing their part in keeping everything in order. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Patty. Vice Mayor Thomas.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Zaragoza. First, I'd like to congratulate Kara on the new arrival. I don't know how accurate it is, but I think it's probably the first baby born as a couple person here. And so I'd like to know what the middle name's going to be, or is.
What the name is?
Yes.
Ayla.
Ayla. That's pretty cool. So congratulations. I just want to put that out there.
Yes, likewise.
First thing I'd like to do is mention how wonderful it is to have the flower baskets back on Main Street. It was a collective effort of John Therici, Zane, our landscaper, and Terry Zeller and myself. And John and I actually had the opportunity to water the baskets for a few days before it was taken over by Moore, and they were ready to go within a couple days to get out there and get that going. So I really appreciate what they've done. We have had several people actually donate to the flower baskets, including several city staff members. The community has been quite generous considering all the challenges going on right now. And I think we're very close to $3,000 right now donated, which is an amazing effort in our community. And we're still looking for a little more. So if people are out there and want to help support the flower baskets, we're still looking for donations, and I'll be hitting up a few people as well. So, but thank you for those who have put into it, and looking forward to closing that out and having a few more flower baskets.
Well, and Dennis, I'll make the collections for City Council as well, because I know we had said last time we'd all sort of pitch in, so we'll do that as well.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. With regards to the protests on Main Street, it was with much sadness that I boarded up my windows last week to protect against potential threats from the Valley and elsewhere. Where do I begin to share this experience that I have had over the last week or so? It has been quite a roller coaster ride of emotions and experiences, all the way from working with merchants on Main Street to evaluate what to do given all the information, and experiencing the community's outrage over the horrendous death of George Floyd. One of many things that stood out and shined was how so many people showed up to support our community. We had folks from every spectrum of our society there to protect their constitutional rights, to protect our city, our businesses, and to protect those that raised their voices in protest. Our city police quietly stood by as a presence of good to protect the protesters, and our community. With all that was going on, I couldn't imagine any other place I should be other than right there on Main Street with our community. I was there each night that protesters were going on, talking with business owners, talking with the protesters and those that were there to protect. It was clear there was a true sense of pride with each group, and I felt real pride in how everyone showed up. There were a few knuckleheads that were disruptive, and honestly, there were just a few people there that were like that. The rest of the people were pretty amazing. One standout figure was Interim Chief Joe Wren. He gave a speech that truly reflected community policing. He recognized and acknowledged the collective grief and anger that was present and assisted in getting the protesters' voices heard. Wendy and I were there for this event on Main Street and not knowing what to expect, but after being inspired by the young people present and by the wisdom of the leadership of Chief Wren, we decided in the spirit of community to join the march down Main Street. Another standout figure was the person coordinating the protests for that evening. This young lady, I won't tell her name because I didn't suggest I would here, but this young lady, I spoke to her for quite a while afterwards, had a great attitude and showed by how she led the evening and how others showed up. She spoke with conviction of clarity and of purpose. She was graceful and kind in her words with respect for everybody that was there. And finally, there was a young man from Sacramento, recently graduated from EMT school, and he is now serving their community there. He was there to support the effort, and his final words, and I would paraphrase this, were, "This is our town, this is our street and our community. Let's take care of it and clean up our mess before we leave." I was there late into the evening, and you know what? That place was spotless. Matter of fact, I think it was more clean than when they left. They did an amazing job. And I'd like to close by saying how proud I am of our community. I felt safe. I felt honored to be there. And I believe that our community's love for the Constitution is evident by every person that was on the street that night. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Thomas. Very well said. Councilmember Acuna.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I have a couple of 3 items this evening. Difficult to improve on Vice Mayor Thomas's excellent words, his observations, and his own personal participation in the events of last week. I think we'll all agree that 2020 is a year that continues to provide every one of us our opportunities in our community to show our resolve, our passion, and our compassion for each other, and understanding that we do have much work ahead of us. I would also echo my own personal pride in the performance of Placerville Police Department. Certainly a small city force, but they acted with a heart of lions last week in the judgment that they showed under the leadership of our new interim chief, Wren. His participation in providing a positive outlook for a better future certainly allowed Wednesday evening's demonstration to end on a very positive note, as you described, Mr. Vice Mayor. And so my huge thanks to every man and woman in our department, and also a huge thanks to every community member that went out and exercised their constitutional rights in a proud and proper manner, and also allowed other voices to be heard at the same time. So we were, as our chief did mention, we did set an example that could be shown throughout the nation. So I think that's something to really be proud of, and thank everybody for what they did. On a much lighter note, again, congratulations to Councilmember Taylor. And about a year ago, I was having a lovely soup and salad lunch at the restaurant and spoke with her mom. And she says, "Ma, I wonder, would it be okay if a council member was pregnant and could?" And I said, "Well, I certainly don't see why that couldn't happen." And of course, Mom smiled, big smile. So congratulations again to you and your whole family. And then on sadly, a more serious note, just to let the community and the council know that Cleve and I, along with Chief Cordero and Chief Wren and the OES operatives in the county, are continuing to refine PG&E's message for the upcoming Power Safety Shut-Off program. What we thought might be clarity has now gotten a little fuzzy on us, and there's been some definite disappointing news in the last few days. So let everybody know that we are on it, and I will continue to report we'll get some clarity from them. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Acuna, and thank you for your continued efforts on that front. They're absolutely invaluable to our community, so thank you. Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, as you all have mentioned, I had a baby since the last meeting, so that's kept me pretty busy. And I was just home from the hospital when all of these protests kind of erupted downtown, and as businesses were boarding up their shops, and I was sad that I wasn't able to be there and to witness it and to see everything. But from what I've heard from community members, I'm just really proud of our community and our police department. And my heart goes out to all the businesses that felt that they had to board up, coming off of COVID-19. Our small business owners have just been through so much. So my heart goes out to them, but I am really proud of our community and how everything turned out. So that's all I have to say today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Wanted to say a few words. First off, again, as everyone else has said, congratulations, Kara, and your family. Wanted to say a few words. I wrote these down because extemporaneous probably isn't my strong suit, so I will read these words as I go forward here. I want to thank the residents of Placerville and El Dorado County for exercising their constitutional rights to peacefully protest the unjust killing of George Floyd. I also want to thank Acting Chief Joe Wren and the officers of the Placerville Police Department for their understanding, support, willingness to work with the organizers of the rallies, and at the same time provide our residents and businesses with the public safety presence so our town didn't experience some of the violence that happened in other cities and towns. And I'll just say for the record that a lot of that violence were subsets of people that had no interest in protesting but were there to just create mayhem under the guise of those protests. So again, I want to thank our police and Joe for that. 2020 will deserve a lengthy chapter in future history books, and we are barely halfway through the year. I still firmly believe America, and Placerville is a small microcosm of our nation, has more that binds us than divides us. And in times of need, communities come together to help their neighbor and lift up the voices of those in need. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. The amount of positive cases is increasing, though thankfully hospitalizations consist of 2 people. At least it was 2 and I had read it. I know Cleve said 1. And recoveries are also increasing at a good pace. To this date, we have had 7 documented cases in the greater Placerville area, and those have all been recovered. I expect we will continue to see more positive cases as more are tested and as we continue to open our economy, public parks, and trails. But the most important numbers, again, are those low hospitalizations and higher amounts of recoveries. We still need the public's vigilance, and we do not have unnecessary outbreaks, so social distancing, masks, and washing hands frequently are still very important. I think we will all have a better indication if there are any new outbreaks in the next couple of weeks, both here locally and across the nation, as we see if the rallies led to any new outbreaks throughout our country. If those cases don't materialize at a rate in excess of what we are experiencing today, I think moving towards stage 4, or at least a very liberal interpretation of stage 3, so we can further open our businesses, get people back to work, and as humans, being social again, which I believe is intrinsic to our overall physical and mental health. We have many challenges ahead of us, balancing our budget, which we will speak about shortly, ensuring the public safety, keeping people healthy and thriving during the pandemic, and having an honest conversation on issues affecting marginalized voices. We are but a tiny cog in a big organism called America, but I am confident Placerville residents will continue to rise to the occasion, weather adversity, and at the end be stronger and more successful for our collective efforts. So again, thank you, community, for all that you did these past times. Thank you. Okay, we will now then move on to our closed session report. Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We really don't have anything to report from closed session. The council did not take reportable action, but the council also did not finish its closed session business. And so the council has adjourned closed session until the end of the open meeting, at which time council will go back into closed session and conduct the rest of the business for that agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Driscoll. So yeah, so at the end of this open session, we will return back to closed session on this item. Thank you. Let's see, adoption. So we're moving on to item 5, adoption of agenda.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? All right, thank you, everybody. There are no ceremonial matters today, so we will then move on to item 7, public comments. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. With that, I will go to item 7.1, written communications, and I believe we did receive one letter from Mr. Brian DeBerry. Mr. Morris, I think, has that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Not really anything to report on this. We did receive you did receive this letter, and we have a meeting set, myself and our Director of Finance, Dave Warren, to meet with Mr. DeBerry tomorrow, and we will report back if necessary and try and resolve this issue. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morris. We will then, and no, nothing else in terms of written.
There are several written items that came in on item 12.1, I believe it is tonight. Those have been distributed to those. Some were requested that we read those into the record, and our city clerk will do that when the time comes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, then we will move to item 7.2, oral communications. And I'll turn this back over to Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to make a quick announcement here about how the public can participate in public comment. If you are joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak, and you will be called upon using the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you're joining by your computer, use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. Unmute yourself when called upon and voluntarily give your name for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we will start with 846.
Hi. Oh, hi. Thank you. It's Jennifer.
Hello.
I guess I'll just say we missed Pierre at our Friday Friends of Clay Street discussion about traffic calming, and we're still hoping to get an update on Cottonwood 4-6. I know there's another Cottonwood agenda item, but you know, it looks like that project is starting up, and just wanted to get an update on that if possible as far as schedule. I did mention in an email to some folks that, you know, I am starting the process of doing a National Register of Historic Places nomination for the Clay Street Bridge. And I think there are some things that haven't really come out yet, at least in what we've seen so far, as far as the historical significance and evaluation. So stay tuned for more on that. I did post, I don't know if some of the Facebook sites you might have seen, I know the topic of confluence we talked about last time, and I did have some great video from that storm event in 2018 that really shows the 2 flows coming together, from whether it's actually still Cedar Ravine Creek or, you know, a wash. It's certainly a drainage that flows into Hangtown Creek, and it's a pretty interesting structure around that confluence of those 2 flows, the 2, Cedar Ravine Creek and Hangtown Creek. And then posting that, there was all kinds of comments about, you know, people's experience with, you know, Cedar Ravine Culvert, or the Cedar Ravine Culvert and that bridge area, and, you know, comments about seeing amazing rainbow trout in the creek and such. But anyway, interesting. And I just wanted to also say the Placerville History Channel effort has been, you know, of course, kind of come out of this Zoom, you know, use that we're all using, and just, you know, the shelter in place that we've all been doing, and you know, creating an event. But I will say that not this week, but the next 2 weeks, we're going to actually be hearing from the Burgess brothers, who have a real story that's based in the gold rush in Coloma, and it's really about, some untold history about Coloma associated with African Americans and their family in particular, but it kind of ironically fits with this Black Lives Matter theme. And so anyway, stay tuned for more emails on that, but it's kind of a neat, thing to have that history and have folks, their business folks down, I think in Sacramento, but that want to tell more of their personal history up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Now taking public comment from Camille.
Hi, Camille.
Hi. Hello, Mr. Mayor Michael Saragosa. First of all, I would like to formally apologize to you. I sent you out an email and I got your name wrong. So I am very, very sorry about that. I made a huge mistake.
No problem.
So with that being said, I would like to address the welcome sign in Placerville. I wrote something that I would just like to read to all of you. The first thing I would like to ask is if you were a person of color and you came to Placerville and the first thing you saw was the greeting sign, "Welcome to Hangtown," would you feel welcome? Whether intentional or not, a community that embraces the name Hangtown perpetuates a system that has been oppressing people of color for centuries. Placerville needs to be held accountable for the message it is sending out and understand that the name Hangtown is a cruel and sinister reminder of America's violent history. The symbol of the noose represents the devastating history of lynching of African Americans and should not be celebrated. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would really like to ask everyone to take this as a time to open up your hearts and try to think about this from a different perspective. I know there are a lot of people here who, hold on to the name dearly because it is historical, but I think all of us know that Placerville is a beautiful place and there are so many other things we could celebrate as a community, and we do not need to represent ourselves in a way that is glorifying violence. So I hope that you all take this into consideration, and maybe we can go back to dry diggings, or just the fact that placer is the kind of gold that was discovered in the riverbanks of the American River and the Sierra foothills. We have so much rich history here, and I think in a way many people will always remember this place as Hangtown, and that's fine, but I just don't think it's a good way to represent ourselves. And furthermore, this community heavily relies on tourism, and I'm very concerned that this could be driving some of the business away. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille.
Now taking public comment from Andrew Vonderschmidt.
Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Do you hear me?
We do.
This is edited hopefully for time.
Okay.
I commend Chief Wren and the City Council and City Government on handling the protests on Wednesday night. However, I have to say that the days leading up to the event were disturbing. I had gone back and forth on whether to attend the planned protest with my family. While I don't want to shield them from the realities of the world, my chief concern is, and always will be, their safety. I was concerned with the righteous rage being demonstrated throughout the country. I was also concerned with the instigated rage being perpetrated in order to turn tense situations violent. I witnessed business owners, many of whom I call friend, decide whether or not to board up their windows. I also witnessed scary individuals posted at storefronts, presumably as security. There were real and credible threats on social media from people saying that they needed to bring the fight to El Dorado County. And on this note, I have to commend the PD for the arrest for making online threats. However, I also witnessed others on social media, local residents, not saying they needed to take the BLM fight to El Dorado County, but planning on rolling coal on the protesters, peaceful or not, and others saying that El Dorado County has more hunters with good aim than libtards, riling each other up, saying that they'd be more than happy to shoot these protesters. I witnessed groups of people in trucks and on motorcycles, flying Confederate flags in some cases, strutting around Main Street like they were itching for a fight. I saw them roll coal. I saw them yell at protesters. I saw proud to be white stickers on trucks revving their engines on Main Street and shouting pseudo-political epithets. Counter-protests exist, and differing viewpoints are healthy and necessary. But this was something more. This was hatred. This was dangerous. In the end, it was the threat of our own residents that tipped the scale for me, and my overwhelming concern for the safety of my family was due to our neighbors. Chief Wren, you said at the protests that we were an example to the nation, a message of hope and peace, and that we could start a dialogue and move forward. So I am challenging you now, and I am challenging the city government and city staff. Please make a meaningful effort. The goal is not and never has been to the actual protest. The goal is to affect systemic change. The goal is to one day not need protest. So create that meaningful dialogue now. Create a commission or committee on fairness, equity, and social justice. I would love to serve on a committee like that. I ask you to look deep within the community, look deep within your departments, and look deep within yourselves. Make changes where you find the need. Make the hard choices. Our community, and indeed the world, depends on it. The world changes locally. If we can't affect change in our own backyards, then how can we hope to leave a world worth occupying in the coming years? I am grateful that the protest was meaningful, peaceful, and powerful, and sent a message that we can indeed do this right. Please don't let that feeling fade. Don't let those promises disappear as the news cycle allows the story to disappear. I'm trusting you. We are all trusting you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Now taking public comment from call-in user.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
We can. Good evening.
Okay, so with everything going on, lots to do. Anyone that would support disbanding or defunding the police department from anyone on the elected side should start to find a new job. It will not be tolerated. The social justice angle of this is, in my mind, a ploy to disintegrate and damage American values. I do not want to see any public official taking a knee, because I don't understand. Everyone thinks it's a Colin Kaepernick thing, but every time I see someone taking a knee, all I can think of is the officer kneeling on a man's neck and murdering him in the street. The imagery, I don't understand, taking a knee. So please don't do that. The welcome sign stays. If anyone wants to try and alter that, find a new job, find a new city. Getting back to the community pride, amen to what the Vice Mayor said about how everyone came together. It was amazing. It was sad to see all those businesses boarded up, but I kind of look back at it as a old-fashioned fire drill. The community came together, helped other businesses protect their own American dream. Whether it was needed or not is immaterial. It was the effort that everyone came together at short notice and helped everyone else, whether they knew each other or not. It was beautiful. And then Measure L. I supported Measure L because I was told that potholes were going to be attacked. Over the last couple of years, I'm not seeing the attack on potholes that I had hoped for. Please start attacking the potholes, because at this point, I'm really starting to think about how can I repeal Measure L. If I'm going to have to wait for giant capital improvements on certain streets to fix the roads and suffer all these potholes that everyone knows and sees, then what's the point? So please start attacking the potholes. That's all for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I do have some comments from Sue Rodman that she wanted me to read into the record.
Okay.
She writes, our Placerville Police Department deserves a very big thank you for their support and leadership during the gathering at the courthouse and for leading the march down Main Street to the bell tower. They were front and center all the way. Way to go, Placerville Police. You made me proud. Sue Rodman.
Great. Thank you, Sue and Regina, for reading hers into the record.
Last call for public comment on 7.2. And Camille, I see your hand raised, but you've already spoken. We have public comment from Maureen Dion Perry.
Good evening, Maureen.
Good evening. Again, I'll make it short and sweet. I really want to recognize Chief Wren for his supportive and collaborative work with the protests that we had, as well as the art display next to the police department. I feel that the city has really, including all of you, responded in a very positive way to our community, expressing our feelings and concerns. And I also would echo what Andrew said, that I hope that we can, I've conversed with Chief Wren about the need to have some community dialogue going forward. As Andrew said, the point of this is not protests, but the point of this is to engage in dialogue with you and our community about how we can do better. Thank you very much for all you're doing. And again, Chief Wren was really quite remarkable in his support and leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further public comment.
Okay, thank you, Regina. Just in terms of follow-up, I don't know whether Pierre or Cleve, did we have anything we can report out on Cottonwood 4 and 6 at this time?
Go ahead, Pierre.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Yes, I'll give a brief status report on Cottonwood 4 and 6. As the council is probably aware, Doug Veerkamp has purchased the property, and he is moving forward with completing the improvements and satisfying the conditions of approval on the tentative map in order to final the map. The current status of the map is that it will expire in October, but he has 2 remaining years under the MAP Act for the life of the map. So as far as any timing beyond that, that'd be more of a conversation with Doug Veerkamp, but he intends to move swiftly to get the project completed as quickly as possible. The work that he's currently doing is trying to improve the property through creation of defensible space to reduce the fire hazard to the surrounding residential properties. So that's basically an update on where we are. He's moving fast, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Great, thank you, Pierre. Council members, any questions on Cottonwood 4 and 6? Yes, Patty.
Pierre, weren't there several improvements already made to that property?
Yes, the property was mass pad graded. So all the pads were in, all the roads were upgraded in. So Doug is going in there, removing any of the hazardous vegetation from the adjoining properties. He is going to finish or just complete any of the pads that still need to be worked on. There's water and sewer lines already in. He is going to complete those. And then he'll probably start submitting improvement plans, for example, to complete the road from Constellation to Roden Court. He wants to do that probably by at least by this fall.
Well, I think everybody, I for one am very happy about what he's doing as far as helping clear out all that, and brush and everything. It was certainly it needed to be done. And I'm very thankful in view of all the wildfire, you know, how we're really trying to prepare and get everybody aware of this will really help. So my thanks for that too.
Staff is very pleased about it. We have received complaints for a number of years on the existing fire hazard. It was nice to actually meet with Doug on site and go over all of the different defensible space methods that he needed to do, and he's currently implementing that with the fire season coming. We're very pleased.
That's great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pierre. Any other questions, comments? Okay. And then just finally, just a quick comment, not quick, but in terms of the community public comments tonight, in terms of demonstrations and Hangtown and all that. I know there's going to be further discussions as we go forward here as a community, and so I think that's probably a better form as we go forward here. So it has more input from people. This is not really a time for us to get into deep conversations here in public comment, but know that we hear you and that those conversations will continue to go forward. So thank you for everyone that spoke up tonight. Dennis, yes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also look forward to continuing this conversation and taking it. You know, it's one thing to have a protest, to protest a particular issue or concern, and in this case, it's a very important one. And I agree with Andrew that our conversation needs to go beyond what has happened, and that our community needs to have a forum to communicate and talk and look for the future of how we want to show up. So I'll leave it at that, because I do look forward to future conversations. And now tonight's not the night to do that, but we are actively working with some of the community members now to meet and discuss and see how we want to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Okay, we will now move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion by roll call vote unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. Go ahead and open that up.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of consent.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. I will then go ahead and open up the consent calendar for any public comments.
Public comment from call-in user.
Good evening, Council. Just going through the register there, seeing if making sure that we're not spending money on pool supplies if the pool's going to be closed for the season, and just some other odd things on there. But that was just my main concern. Is I know these orders were probably under contract long ago, and I don't know how the city was successful in maybe halting those contracts. So just an update on that would be great. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Terry, and I think we had discussed this a little bit last time. There's still some things we have to do in terms of the maintenance of the pool, even if we're going to have it closed through the season. I think what those costs are likely related to.
Right, yeah. Those costs are ongoing. We still have water in the pool. We are still holding water in the pool because it is a safety issue, as well as just good for the machinery. Our chlorine deliveries have been greatly reduced. We calculated what the cost reductions were going to be, but there's still a certain amount of expense that goes into the pool. One thing we didn't calculate, but we're doing right now, is we're only cycling the filters for Monday and Thursday, just 2 days per week, which is a recommendation of our pool professionals that help us with the pool and consulting. So there are going to be some ongoing costs. There always are with the pools. but those are either reflective of bills that we had to pay or things that are ongoing just to keep a minimum safety and chlorine level.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I kind of jumped a bit ahead there in terms of if there was any more public comments, so I'll send it back to Regina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last call for item 8, consent calendar. No further public comment.
Okay, thank you, Regina. We have a first and a second. Any other comments?
Mayor, if I could add just quickly, I want to remind
Yes.
people again, I think I mentioned this last time, chemicals does not necessarily mean it's for the pool. We buy chemicals, a lot of chemicals for our wastewater plant also. So if you're seeing large purchases for chemicals, most likely they're for our wastewater plant.
That's right. Thank you, Cleve. Appreciate that clarification. Okay, seeing no further comments, Ms. O'Connell, roll call, please.
Mayor Saragosa,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna,
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We do not have any items pulled tonight or ordinances, so we will move to item 11. That's public hearings. And item 11.1, adopt a resolution that continues the adopted fiscal year 2019-2020 operating budget expenditure level authorization as modified through May 31st, 2020, and prorated at 25% for the period of July 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2020. And Mr. Warren has this report for us tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Over the past 6 months, your budget team, which is comprised of all department heads and the city manager, has collectively developed both the operating and CIP budget in a manner that aligns with the city council's established fiscal policies and maintains essential program delivery to the greatest extent possible. Unfortunately, we began this process with a $1.6 million general fund deficit, and that was primarily due to the anticipated negative impacts of COVID-19. The budget team worked feverishly in identifying $976,000 in budget adjustments, leaving a remaining general fund budget deficit of $664,000. The budget team continues to look at other cost containment measures. We're looking at everything, as well as other funding opportunities, including fees and grants. Approximately 71% of the general fund budget is personnel costs, and due to that, the city's labor negotiating team began meeting with employee groups on May 13th of this year to discuss the general fund budget deficit and potential personnel cost savings to help offset the deficit. And those discussions continue. As a matter of fact, we have a meeting tomorrow with one of our unions. As part of the budget development process, the City Council did hold a special operating budget workshop on May 13th. We presented the draft fiscal year 2021 operating budget, including department requests, capital outlay, and conference training and travel requests that were received. And we also received input from the council and the public. It's important to note that 56.1% of your general fund revenues comes from sales tax, which is a very volatile revenue source, as you know. It's highly affected by the economic activity of the time. We anticipate receiving the sales tax results for the quarter ending June 30th of this year in August. So in the latter part of August, we'll get that second quarter sales tax return, which is critical information in order to properly forecast the sales tax revenues for the entire fiscal year 2021, considering the extreme volatile economic environment we're experiencing right now. A second budget workshop is tentatively scheduled for September 2nd, and a revised operating budget and CIP budget will be presented at that meeting. We're tentatively anticipate holding a public hearing of the proposed fiscal year 2021 operating and CIP budget on September 8th, which is one of your first regular meeting in September. And then we would recommend that you adopt that budget hopefully on September 22nd. Because we do not anticipate completing the fiscal year 2021 operating budget deliberations by June 30th of this fiscal year, we recommend that the City Council adopt a 90-day interim continuing budget appropriation that would encompass the period of July 1st to September 30th of this year to avoid interruption to city operations. You are required by government code to adopt a budget, and this would allow you the appropriation to continue operations, giving your budget team and your labor negotiating team time to figure out how do we close the gap in your general fund budget. The interim continuing appropriations are presented through May 31st in your staff report to ensure the necessary operation expenditures are authorized until the budget is adopted. The interim spending controls are calculated using a simple formula prorating the existing 1920 operating line items equal to 5.1 million, or $20,679,385 times 25% for the 3-month period. And you can see in your staff report the summary of that 5.16 million. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask that you approve this continuing budget appropriation.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to public comment.
Now taking public comment from call-in user 2.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Okay, so looking at this, correct me if I'm wrong, does this mean that the same spending rate of last year is going to continue for the next 3 months? If they're just, does this mean that the same? That's my question. Is the same spending rate as last year going to happen under this resolution? If so, why not do it spending rate last year minus 5%, 10%? Just thinking, but whatever it comes down to, I trust Mr. Warren's recommendation. So that was just a question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last call for public comment on 11.1. No further public comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Regina. In terms of the question in regards to the continuous appropriation or spending authorization, Dave, I don't know if you had any comments on that to answer the question.
I do. Good question. So the answer is yes, it would continue the authorization up to our current spending level. However, some of those things, the city manager, as well as the council's directed us. For example, we currently have a hiring freeze. We've had at least one retirement already since this budget was adopted back in June of 2019. We are not operating the pool currently, and that was included in this budget. So there'll be savings from not reopening the pool. And as far as labor negotiations, we're hoping that through that process, we'll actually experience savings. And I can't go into the details of those because it's confidential, but we're hoping, we did mention the early retirement program that the city has initiated, and that's all I can talk about that, but that is a public item that we've discussed before. But beyond that, it's confidential. But other items, for example, equipment, we're holding off purchasing any equipment this year. We were authorized last year to purchase equipment over $100,000 from the general fund. Conference training and travel is limited to just safety related training, things, certificate renewals, those kind of things. So we're planning on really bearing down on our expenditures getting through this first 90 days. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Dave. So yeah, that's exactly, I mean, we've sort of already, whether it wasn't necessarily a number we picked, but we've been cutting down on those expenditures as we move forward here, and realizing that we have this deficit going forward. Thank you, Dave, for the explanation.
I have a question, Michael.
Yep.
I'd like to ask Dave, you know, you read all kinds of things and everybody's a forecaster at this time, but just very, very recently, I was reading an article that is pertaining to auto sales. And they were saying in this article, it states that quite surprisingly, auto sales are picking up greatly. And I know that is quite the auto sales, the sales tax that we derive from that is a lot for us. So in anticipation, I mean, there might be some other surprises that we might experience. So how is there going to be any, are you leaving anything open that we could, change, that maybe we don't have to cut so drastically?
Yeah, great question. We're continuing to analyze your sales tax and other revenue sources. And Cleve and I met with HDL about a week or two ago. And what they're seeing is things are bad, but not as bad as what they anticipated back in late March, early April.
Right.
And car sales is one of the areas that it is bad, but it's not nearly as bad as they thought. And I think there are some things like low interest rates that may help that sector. But you're definitely going to see some rough quarters, and I anticipate that your second quarter is probably going to be the worst of this year. Third quarter will be bad, but not as bad. Fourth quarters, they first said it may be a little bad, but now they're saying it could be another bad quarter. But the first quarter in 2021, we're hoping will be neutral or actually positive. But at this point, I wouldn't bet on anything more than just a neutral quarter.
Thank you.
Neutral is great in this environment, I guess.
That's true.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I closed public comment, but if I didn't, public comment's closed. Do we have any further discussion or comments, or do we want to entertain a motion? Yes, Councilmember Acuna.
Oh, if I could, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a comment, and then I will be happy to make a motion.
Okay.
Patty, I think, has been there with me before. We've been in this situation several years when the Great Recession hit.
Right.
We had to do this. And what Dave has done is taken a framework using very simple math, which is very appropriate, so that he and the city can continue to operate beyond our obligation, which is to have a balanced budget ready to go on July 1st. To express my thanks to Cleve and Dave both, I often wonder these days if they ever get a chance to sleep, because once the COVID emergency began, they were instantly putting the brakes on things. As we all knew, a very serious situation was brewing, and it happened. And they quickly, instantly recognized what was taking place, and they have been doing a great job, as have all of our department heads and all of our employees, to recognize that this again 2020 is the year of everything, and they've done a great job. And this will get us through it's kind of like a continuing resolution. We've done this before, Dave. And so on a positive note, somebody can't explain to me why the stock market is headed back up past 27,000. That's a good thing. Maybe, Dave, that's a hint. We should put our money there. The good news is Dave is cautiously has been preparing us now for months. He did get the preliminary numbers for the first quarter on our sales tax. And we were all very pleasantly notified about a week ago that we were only down 1%. So that's great news. And of course, there's still always, the state has the right to revise things. So we don't count our chickens until they're all home in the hen house. Now, the second quarter, let's hope that we're equally blessed, that this town is just a little sales tax generator. And the activity that I saw at some of our businesses that were open has been a real positive one. So with that, I would just thank both of them and all of our department heads and employees for their dedication through this very difficult time. We had the urgency of the illness itself, which our vice mayor unfortunately knows firsthand. And now there's this massive economic fallout from this. So I thank them all for their work, and I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve item 11.1.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. We have a first and a second. Further discussion or comments? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Saragosa,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna,
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes 5-0. And again, Dave and all the rest of staff, as Councilmember Kuna mentioned, thank you for all the hard work on this. It's not easy coming to this. It's a lot easier to, when it's flush and we have money to spend, and it's very difficult when we're talking about people's lives and other things that are involved in these cuts. So thank you for the hard work on this. And hopefully, as Councilmember mentioned, our second quarter numbers will be neutral so that we won't have as big of an impact, hopefully. Okay, item 11.2, adopt a resolution confirming the assessments and the diagrams as described in full detail in the reports on file with the city clerk, and direct NBS to prepare and submit the levy of assessments to El Dorado County for the placement of the fiscal year 2020-2021 secured property tax roll, and confirming the adoption of the resolution shall constitute the levy of assessments for the fiscal year commencing in July 1st, 2020 and ending in June 1st or June 30th, 2021. And again, this is Mr. Warren with his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So this is a routine item. It's part 2 of a 2-part series. Part 1 occurred at your meeting held on May 12th, when the council adopted a resolution declaring its intention to provide the annual levy and collection of assessments for the city's landscaping, lighting, maintenance districts as required by Streets and Highways Code. Part 2 requires the council to hold a public hearing, which is scheduled for tonight, and adopt a resolution approving the 2 engineers' reports included in your packet. The city currently has 2 LL&D districts, Orchard Hill and Cottonwood Park. The engineer reports for both districts present status quo budgets and levy amounts. The current level of assessments for both districts are adequate in covering the basic costs for operation and maintaining the districts for fiscal year 2021. So tonight, we respectfully request the council to approve the 2021 LMB assessments by adopting the resolution tonight. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Mr. Warren at this point? Okay, seeing none, I will go ahead and open up for public comment.
In public comment from 846.
Hi, it's Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
I can't remember who was on council last time I just brought this up, but the main thing is if you notice there, the senior apartments and the multifamily apartments are treated, they're not assessed per dwelling unit. And we talked about this and talked about how, it's difficult to change. But, when we look at, again, the concerns we have about traffic calming and how would we actually pay for, anything related to traffic calming on Clay Street, and we look at this assessment as one source of funds, I just wanted to kind of put it on the radar there that you've got 50% per dwelling unit and 75% per dwelling unit in the properties that have, actually the majority of the dwelling units. And I guess the point is, the owner, I think, of those properties isn't all the people that live there. It's, a single owner. But anyway, it boils down to around, I don't know, maybe $4,000 to $5,000 or so if you actually assessed every dwelling unit equally for essentially maintaining the lighting and maintaining Duffy Park. And then, potentially you would have, additional funds to do some things with dealing with maintaining aspects of the road itself. And again, when we say maintaining, we mean, putting some kind of traffic calming, system in there. So just putting that on the radar. And I guess it just kind of opens up the question too with Cottonwood 4-6 being on the horizon, which, seems like they will be, again, part of Cottonwood utilizing these resources. I don't know what's planned in there. Obviously, there's going to be some lighting, but I don't know that they have a Duffy Park type facility planned. So I just wonder, again, thinking ahead to these assessments and how to address some issues, associated with, let's just say, the road. We've talked about stop signs and different kinds of speed humps, cushions, different things. But these things all involve some money and ongoing, just costs of maintenance. So just wanted to put that out there. I'm glad that, that it's stabilized. I think that there was comment earlier, and maybe you could comment on this tonight, of, projecting that those assessments might go up at some point in the future. But I guess it's basically saying $14,000 to keep the lights going on Clay Street and maintain Duffy Park. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Now taking public comment from call-in user 2.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as I understand it, the city, to change the contracts that they have with these two districts, would have to probably do a Prop 218 notice and election. Just wondering if, whatever the process is, what would the costs be to the city? And if successful, when would that cost benefit be paid off? Would it take a year? Would it take 10 years? Just wondering if, I find it kind of interesting that the apartment complex, as Jennifer stated, might be charged as a unit. And it seems much fair that everyone is charged dwelling units. Single family homes, apartments, they're all charged as dwelling units. And now that the unfinished Cottonwood is probably underway, all those units going forward, wouldn't now be the proper time to look into renegotiating that contract, and what would it involve, especially the costs? That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Last call for public comment on 11.2. No further public comment.
Okay, thank you, Regina. We will close public comment, bring it back to council. We had a couple of questions out there. Dave, I saw you taking notes. If there's anything you wanted to comment on a couple of those questions and comments from the public.
Thank you, Mayor. I do. So the senior apartments, when they put together this engineer's report, Mr. Rivas and I looked at this, and they used EDUs, or equivalent dwelling units, and a single family home would be considered one EDU. And Pierre, correct me if I'm wrong, but the apartment complexes were considered less than one EDU because they were smaller, they had less amenities. The fact that those folks probably don't use the improvements as much as others. So that's, and looking at the size of those apartments, it was reasonable in looking at it. So we feel, or I feel anyway, that they were reasonably apportioned. In order to change that, we would have to go back to the property owner. So if the council wanted to change it, unless you wanted to decrease the assessment, if we wanted to raise the assessment, it would have to go through a Proposition 218 noticing period and vote. So, yeah. So that's that. In regards to phases 4 and 6, they were included in the footprint of this LMD map. And that's something that we'll be looking at as those properties are developed. And they would share in the cost of the improvements that benefit those lots. So the lighting, landscaping, the park that's already there. If there's a nexus between the homes in phases 4 and 6 benefiting from the park, Duffy Park, they would have to share in that cost. So that's something that could cost share that cost with the existing assessment properties. In regards to traffic calming measures, it would be illegal for the city to use LMD funds for roads. BAD, which is a different type of assessment, or a CFD, you could. But with this particular type of district, we cannot do that, unfortunately. And as far as cost of reapportioning assessments, to do the whole district, I would estimate that cost, if you were to farm it out to a contractor like MBS, it would probably be between $20,000 and $30,000. The work that will need to be done on phases 4 and 6, we haven't really got that far yet on that, but I would suggest that we take kind of a hybrid approach where staff works with MBS but does most of the work, so we save some money. So.
Thank you, Dave. Pierre, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, what David just mentioned?
No, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just want to state that I wholly concur with what Mr. Warren said. We have talked about the assessments, and I want to make it very clear that Cottonwood phases 4 and 6 is not separate of, but part of the original Cottonwood plan development. It's not a separate project. It's 38. We're probably looking at 38 additional single-family units that would be built in there that will participate in the LLND and would participate in paying for the lighting, the landscaping, and also for Duffy Park as well.
Pierre, I did have a question on that. As those go forward, would they be assessed at the current rate, or would those be assessed at a different rate, like, for lack of a better term, market rate, if we didn't do any type of reevaluation on the whole Cottonwood?
That's a good question. I would defer to Mr. Warren on that.
Thank you. My understanding, and I'll correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Driscoll, City Attorney, is that they would look at all the properties that benefit from those improvements and then develop an analysis showing what the reassessments would be. Now, if the assessments for the existing parcels are equal or less of what they are today, we could approve it. If it raised the assessments, the city council would have to choose to go to the property owners and ask that we could raise those assessments. If they're the same or less, that wouldn't have to happen. With the existing parcels or the new parcels in phases 4 and 6, we have currently one property owner, and so that could be done directly with that one property owner in developing those assessment levels.
Okay, so those could be different then than what we currently. So there could be 2 tiers then, one for the new people and then one that's already there, unless we redid the entire thing.
Potentially, and I see that we would probably bring some options to the council.
Okay.
We could consider. I don't think there's going to be one answer to that question.
Got it. Thank you. Councilmember Borelli.
Yes, Dave, you've indicated, we've talked about this for years, and Vice Mayor Thomas brought it up last time and talked about raising the assessments, especially there. And well, we discussed Orchard Hill in particular, that the current assessments are not meeting the current costs. Is that right? And you told me that the process we have to go through, but I think I really, at this point, I'm kind of frustrated. Now we've got another situation coming up, and I just think now's the time to act on this. And I get the current contract that was entered into years and years ago, but if is Cottonwood in the same category as Orchard Hill, that their assessments are not meeting our current costs? So those are, I know, 2 or 3 questions, but here I am.
Yeah, Cottonwood's in much better position than Orchard Hill, but that budget is tightening. It's meeting its operating costs, but there's really nothing being set aside for deferred maintenance. It has, I want to say about $45,000 in fund balance that could be used for deferred maintenance, but ongoing dollars going into a sinking fund, it's really not happening at this time. So this does provide an opportunity for Cottonwood to kind of get caught up and really evaluate things. But like I said before, if you don't touch the existing parcels, the ones that are paying into the assessment district now, if you keep them at the where they're at now or below, there wouldn't be any additional action. But if we want to raise those assessments, we would actually have to go to the property owner with the Proposition 218 process. And they could protest. So
I think we should look into it, because this is ridiculous, you know, to me, and just in my estimation, you know, now's the time.
yeah, I agree. It's a good time to evaluate it.
Vice Mayor Thomas.
Oh, thank you. I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Borelli. However, it's really up to the property owners as to whether they want the assessment or not, and we should. And we talked about doing this later in the year, and we'll cut this brief, but I think we need to solicit them and find out whether they are interested in having it raised or having the level of service reduced. You know, we can't continue providing the same level of service that was started in the 90s here in the 2020s. It just isn't financially possible. So there needs to be a conversation with those landowners or property owners and determine whether they want to continue the level of service at the current cost, as well as some cost of I can't remember what you call them, cost of living raises associated with it, or do they want to lower the level of service? And I think it's entirely up to them, and we need to pose that question to them and allow them to make that decision. But we need to start that process and have that conversation with them. So,
thank you, Vice Mayor. I agree with both Councilmember Borelli and Vice Mayor Thomas. Mr. Warren, what would be the process to get that going? I know we talked about it a little bit, but just for a refresher, how do we get that dialogue going with those property owners?
Probably the first thing would be really looking at your budget, what it takes to fully service that. And I'm really focusing on Orchard Hill, which is, we were talking about Cottonwood, which is in
right.
State. Now we're talking about Orchard Hill off of Mallard Lane in that area. And that district, unfortunately, is barely, covering its operating costs, let alone capital costs. So, Terry and I could sit down and work with Cleve in developing a comprehensive budget and capital replacement program, and then evaluate what the assessments would look like at that level or at different levels, and then present the information to maybe have a public meeting with property owners, advertise a meeting, a town hall, and then discuss what those costs are, what the community would like to see, and then develop a plan from there.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to make it more convenient for them, for us to even meet with them if they have, some sort of a meeting place out there? I'm not familiar. Driving by, I don't see that they have any kind of a meeting hall or anything, but or does this have to be in our, accessible to all public in our meeting chambers?
It doesn't have to. Why don't we do, what I would suggest is if you could direct staff to go back, we kind of received this direction during your budget workshop, but to have us come back with a staff report that would kind of lay out a framework of what we talked about, and then you could give us further direction from there.
Yes, and I would think we can put that on item 14, just to make it a little bit cleaner.
And
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. And just for clarity, I don't know that we need to do that right away. I think they have enough on their plates to get us through the next 3 months or better. So while we may, we can talk about that later, but that's, that was my intention last meeting, and I don't know that I want to change that.
I sure don't. This has been going on years, not months. This has been going on years, and I just don't want to, we're talking about it and we realize it, and I just like to see us progress, so.
Okay, yes, Councilmember Acuna.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly agree with everybody's comments and concerns about the situation. And I appreciate Vice Mayor Thomas's concerns also about staff's priorities right now. This maybe the fact that the last 2 units in Cottonwood are moving forward now, and there'll have to be a new assessment map done when those lots are all created and parcel numbers assigned and all that good work. It would be the time to then look at the fact that these, as going back to Councilmember Borelli's concerns, that these 2 districts, when they were created, unfortunately, neither one of them has any mechanism in it to adjust for inflation. As Dennis said, we're doing things with $1990 in the 2020s. It's not working. I believe Councilmember Taylor has commented in the past, the worn out playground, for example, that's in Orchard Hill. Everybody's enjoyed it to the point that it's worn out, and there's absolutely no dollars in the current system for replacement of that. And the first option, I think, one of these times, Mr. Zoller is going to come forward and tell us he's going to have to close it because the equipment isn't safe anymore. So I think it does definitely need to be addressed, because all of the residents need to be aware that there are potential issues. There are known issues at Orchard Hill, and then Cottonwood, making sure the assessments are fair and equitable when the new maps are created with the completion of the final 2 units, which is the existing subdivision map, not any kind of a unique project. So maybe that would be the good time to bring this back. But with that, if you'd be pleased, I would go ahead and make a motion to approve item 11.2 as outlined by staff.
Thank you, Councilmember.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. We have a first and second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Ms. O'Connell, roll call, please.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna,
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, that measure passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 12 and item 12.1. Direct staff to continue working with the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, with developing an affordable housing project on the state-owned Placerville Armory site on Armory Road. And Mr. Rivas has this report for us.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I find that I have to recuse myself from this, so I will abstain and I will mute my.
You will go dark.
I'll go dark.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Borelli. She will be recusing herself on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just a little recap. In January of 2019, Governor Newsom signed Executive Order N-06-19. And what that executive order did was to recognize the severe affordable housing crisis in California. So the governor directed the Department of General Services to inventory all surplus state property statewide for suitability for developing affordable housing. So subsequent to that, staff has engaged with the Department of Housing and Community Development, who is assisting the Department of General Services in the feasibility of developing these various surplus properties for affordable housing projects, one of those being located here in the city of Placerville, the former Placerville Armory site off of Armory Road next to the fairgrounds. So we have been working with HCD up until January 8th of 2020, when the governor signed Executive Order N-23-20. And that's not to be confused with any flu virus. But what that executive order did was just direct that any of these identified sites for affordable housing can be used for a shelter for individuals that are homeless. But I want to read strongly that as part of that executive order, the governor said, so long as the usage would not delay affordable housing development on those properties. So that's the That's basically the end goal of the state, how it wants to utilize these surplus properties. So staff essentially following that backed off because both the city and the county have been collaboratively working to address the issue of homelessness on the western slope. And to better address holistically, the city and county developed what was known as the Joint Policy Statement on Homelessness. That draft policy was considered by both the Board of Supervisors and the City Council on April the 14th of this year. So there was an action item in that policy that basically was saying that the Placerville Armory would be looked at closely as a possible traditional housing navigation center. And following both the board and the council meetings, that action directive was deleted from the policy. So with that, the property is still open. The state is still wishing to look at the feasibility of affordable housing project on that site. I think it behooves the city to collaboratively continually work with the state in doing that and be a partner if they move forward with that site being developed as an affordable housing project site. So staff, it was just it was the thought of staff that we would bring a day like that, come forward to the council and just get your concurrence and direct staff to continue to pursue working with HCD in developing an affordable housing on the former Armory site. And that concludes staff's report. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Pierre, for the report. Do you have any questions for Mr. Rivas at this point? Yes, Councilmember Taylor.
Hi, Pierre. We approved two affordable housing projects a couple months ago, which I believe increased stock to about 150 units. Is that, do you know off the top of your head how many units those two projects are creating?
Yeah, the Middletown Affordable Housing Project will hopefully create 82 100% affordable units. And then the Mallard project would be 72 units that would be 100% affordable for a total of 154. So okay, under our current RENA for the current housing cycle that we're under, cycle 5, that's 2021, or that's actually 2013 through 2021. We have 133 affordable housing units that we need to create. So we would actually, if both those projects were to be implemented, we would then be 21 over our requirement under the cycle 5. Staff brought to the council back in March of this year. Staff will bring to the council an annual progress report on this housing element and where it stands. And so, so far, we have built 0 affordable housing units. In fact, I don't think the city has built any affordable housing units in decades. So we're very excited that both the Mallard and the Middletown projects are going forward. I think what the council approved at that time was not necessarily the project, but you authorized staff to apply for grants, right, that would help fund those projects. So that's where it stands. We don't know if we'll get those grants. We're keeping our fingers crossed that we will. It would be nice if we could have these built and have these count for the cycle 5. We're currently preparing our cycle 6 housing element update, and we work very closely with SACOG in basically having realistic numbers for the city. So our RENA for the 2021-2029 cycle 6 is 90 affordable units. So we've come down quite a bit from the 133 that we were required to develop between 2013 and 2021. And just for the audience, and so that everybody fully understands, the city isn't mandated to actually construct these units, but the city is required to provide for the planning tools necessary to develop them. So those of you probably recall, staff developed what was called the Affordable Housing Overlay, the Opportunity Overlay. which then allowed for high density development on certain parcels that were identified. Housing element, the two, both the Mallards and the Middletown sites included in that, but yet maintain the underlying zoning so that the property owner wouldn't feel that they are inversely condemned and were taking away their property rights. So it's hopefully will work pretty well on these two sites.
Thank you.
And Pierre, I mean, I know at least one person that's interested, I think two actually, of affordable housing builders that at least have made some initial inquiries, but do we still have, as far as we know, interest from affordable housing builders that are interested in this property?
Yes, we have two of the original developers that were interested in. They basically, their business model is doing production affordable housing projects. Have both contacted me just within the last week for a status update. So hopefully they're both viewing this meeting, and maybe one of them will speak tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rivas. Any other questions at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Now taking public comment from Jeree Glasser.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jeree Glasser Hedrick, and I'm the Vice President of Northern California for Jamboree Housing. I want to speak in support of the city pursuing the development of the Armory site as affordable housing, permanent affordable housing. To provide some background on Jamboree, we're a nonprofit community development corporation that has over 30 years of experience specifically in the realm of affordable housing. We oversee 93 projects that house 9,000 units and serve 18,800 residents. Our mission is to deliver quality affordable housing and services that transform lives and support communities. We've toured the Armory site and we're really excited at the potential of its. It's extremely well amenitized for a community that is on the rural side of the spectrum. It also, given its state ownership, it really has the potential to be developed into a feasible project where at times, given your lack of resources at the city level, it's somewhat challenging to pencil an affordable housing deal because a lot of the funding programs require a lot of leverage from the local government. By way of background, although Pierre did a great job of explaining your RHNA goals, in terms of need, your community, according to California Housing Partnership Corporation, which is a nonprofit think tank for the state of California, has identified 3,070 individuals, low-income renters in the county, I'm sorry, that are in need of affordable housing. So given your need and the really great amenities that this site has, I urge you to allow staff to proceed in discussions with HCD to further explore this site for development of permanent supportive housing or permanent affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeree.
Now taking public comment from call-in user 2.
Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so this is my giant concern. The previous commenter is a corporation that is in the business of this. They will make money making a business out of getting free state property so that they can build property and make money on the whole project. This is what you have to be really concerned about and really look into. That's why I would like to see a committee created by the council to oversee what staff is talking about. I'm really concerned that we have Director Rivas talking with the state, talking with certain specific stakeholders in quiet with no public review about what they're discussing. We really need to know what the plan is. Like was stated previously, there are two projects, one off of Mallard, one over by DMV, that are going to meet our arena needs. And like Director Rivas said at the end of his statement, the city is not required to build these. The city is only required to zone for these and create programs. So don't be intimidated that you have to create these affordable housing, homeless shelters. I do not want to see, for lack of a better term, it's not a good term, but ghettos, right? Cheap housing, and in 10, 20 years, it becomes a ghetto neighborhood. I do not want to see that. I want to see quality building. I want to see services in the city. But really, I would like to ask the council to create a committee to oversee what staff is asking, to have discussions with the state and these quote unquote stakeholders that are actually professional businesses, include property owners, business owners that are going to be impacted. Don't flood this committee with all of those that could make money off of this project, and bring the sunlight to the public on what is being discussed. Because with just those two projects by DMV and Mallard Lane, we already meet our arena numbers for a long time. So to rush forward with the Armory project is questionable at this time. So just start thinking about it. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Last call for public comment on 12.1. I see no further comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Regina. We'll bring it back to council for further discussion.
Mayor,
Vice Mayor Thomas. Oh,
excuse me, Mayor, can I just mention, Regina,
yes.
was there not an item that was requested to be read on this item?
Thank you. Thank you, Cleve, for reminding me. Yes, we do have a letter that was submitted by the Western Slope Community Coalition on Affordable Housing and Homelessness. Let me just read that. Dear Placerville City Council, the June 9th, 2020 City Council meeting includes agenda item 12.1, which recommends that the City Council direct staff to continue working with the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, to develop an affordable housing project on the state-owned Placerville Armory site located at 212 Armory Road. We urge you to support and approve this recommendation. Approval of this recommendation is another step forward in addressing the need for an estimated 3,070 affordable workforce housing units in El Dorado County, as reported in the August 2019 California Housing Partnership Report on El Dorado County's housing emergency. Based on the economic research in this report, in 2019, renters in El Dorado County needed to earn $34.13 per hour, 2.8 times the state minimum wage, to afford the median monthly asking rent of $1,775. These rent costs and shortage of affordable workforce housing in El Dorado County are stifling economic growth, consuming an ever-growing share of the paychecks of working families, contributing to homelessness. Further, we hope that during the planning process that staff will consider and provide a recommendation to include supportive services in the project plan for this affordable housing project. Again, we wholeheartedly encourage you to approve the recommendation in agenda item 12.1 and move forward developing this additional affordable housing. Sincerely, Tamara Janies, Maureen Dion Perry, Jamie Butler, Frank Porter, co-chairs for the Western Slope Coalition on Affordable Housing and Homelessness. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
thank you, Regina. Okay, I think Vice Mayor Thomas had a comment.
I think Cleve had something to say before that.
Yeah, I could maybe just add a couple of things. Number one, there was an assumption made by one of the speakers that the state is going to give this property to a private owner to develop. I have no proof of that. I don't know if Pierre has any information along those lines. There's been a few of these have been done. I'm only aware of one in Stockton where a contract was actually done. and I do not have the copy of that to see what the provisions of those are yet. The other thing, one speaker also mentioned referred to this as not want to see homeless shelters built. This is not at all what we're looking at. This is permanent housing that would be built on these sites. Affordable, but permanent affordable housing. So I just want to clarify those two items.
Thank you,
If I may,
Cleve.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I just want to make a couple of clarifications too. While we understand some of the concerns of the previous speaker, I just want to reemphasize that the property is owned by the state of California, and it's the goal of the state of California to develop affordable housing. I don't think if it wants to develop affordable housing on the site, it can and it will. I just think it behooves the city to be a partner rather than be, an active partner rather than be a silent partner and just assist in the development so we have a quality affordable housing project on that site. Staff is aware of the city of Stockton that went through the process. And basically the lead agency would be the Department of General Services. It'll be the Department of General Services that will develop a request for proposals that'll be advertised for any number of developers out there, both probably maybe for profit or for nonprofit, that wish to develop the site. And they're going to submit their proposal to the Department of General Services, and they're going to issue them. They're going to award it to somebody. It won't be the city involved in that process. We just want to be involved in the making sure that it's going to fit our needs as well. So I just want to emphasize that it's really a state project, but I think it just behooves us to be an active partner in this process as it moves forward.
Thank you, Pierre, for those clarification comments as well. And we'll go to Vice Mayor Thomas.
Thank you. I have a question for Pierre. Is this, first question, is this building by right? They have the right to build there?
Yes, they do.
Okay, second question then is, will this have the opportunity to go before a planning commission review?
I would hope that the state would facilitate that, because any project on the site is not going to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. It's a state project, be subject to CEQA. So any kind of CEQA review, we would hope then that they would be able to daylight the project before our planning commission.
Would we?
The kinds of things that we want to make sure that the state does and just facilitate to the maximum extent the city processes for input.
So other than your efforts, do they have any responsibility or accountability to our community for the design elements when it comes to this construction?
We don't have any real say, but I think that's why the city should not be a silent partner, but be an active partner in the development of an affordable housing project on the site. So they're not obligated to submit to any design standards, but I think if we are an active partner, I think we will be able to have input into the design of that project. I mean, it's a very ideal location. It's right across the street from another apartment complex,
right?
Placerville apartment.
All right, thank you. And then I just like to state that our community, regardless of what our RENA numbers state, our community is in desperate need of workforce housing to assist and be available for those people, whether it's a teacher, somebody working in a restaurant. You pick the low income jobs that we have in this community that help support our community and support our businesses. And we just do not have, and you can talk to any one of them, we do not have enough workforce housing in this community to support the people that work here. And it increases their costs the further away they have to drive to get less expensive housing. It is a way that you make it more difficult for people to get ahead and for people to move up, is because they end up spending all their money on housing and not able to spend money on other things that help them move ahead. So this is critically important in our community to help these people. So thank you for your answers there, Pierre.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Acuna.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rivas, thank you very much. You've done a great job in clarifying several important points. I appreciate your information. We've reminded all of us that the state is the property owner, and whoever would choose to develop on this site would be working with the state of California. That's a big lift in of itself. Couple of speakers, one mentioned and I think it was the old world of affordable housing. A lot of our projects, as you mentioned, were built decades ago. And if I remember correctly, once those projects all had time spans where the developers were required, because of funding and good loans and what have you that they did receive from the state, to keep the units at low income or affordable housing. But then after say 10 or 20 years, I'm recalling that the units could revert to market rate. Am I recalling that scenario correctly, Pierre?
I believe you are. Unfortunately, I can't specifically state any of the time periods on some of our existing affordable housing apartment complexes here in the city. But I do know that, for example, currently, if say Mallard in Middletown were to move forward, they would enter into an agreement where they would remain affordable for 55 years.
All right, so there's still, it's a much, much longer time frame, but still a similar process then.
Yes.
All right, now, I think one of my big concerns is having workforce housing, as the Vice Mayor just mentioned, critical. Pierre, there was also in the old days, there was low income housing. And there was always a lot of pushback from no one wanted low income housing in their neighborhood because of the issues that it brought. And is affordable housing like low income, or is this truly mixed income housing?
It would be my understanding that this would be a 100% affordable housing project, meaning that, let me get to my notes here, because I anticipated that question of affordability coming up. We can divide it up into the affordable into three categories. We have low, very low, and extremely low. So to qualify as low, you're 80% or less than the median income of the county. To be very low, you're between 31 and 50% of the median income. And for extremely low, you're at 0 to 30% of the median income.
Would the city have
about $50,000 per year? A little bit.
Oh, okay.
So to give you an idea about how much money, of course, it could be, then it would differ upon the number in the family, size of the household.
Right.
But those are the sort of the numbers you're looking at.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate that. Now I have a current definition of affordable housing. Would the city or have any say as to the percentages of low, very low, and is it extremely? Do we have any say as to what percentage goes into making up the project?
It's a good question. I don't have the answer to that.
Because I know it's been proven that it's much better scenario if you do get a mix of incomes.
Yeah.
The projects tend to be far more successful. So we could hopefully get that answer as this process moves forward.
Yes, I would agree. And if you wouldn't mind, I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Vice Mayor Thomas said earlier. Is we have a lot of our jobs here, both current and that we're creating here, both in Placerville and the greater Placerville area, are service jobs, and they don't pay very high, and so they meet these definitions of needing an affordable housing based on their salary. So I think we're looking at providing housing for people that want that work here and they want to live here as well. Housing is very, very tight. We haven't been developing a lot of units, as I said earlier, when in March, when we came to you with our annual housing report, we had only built a total of 204 units for the, since 2013. So we built 52 in 2013, 10 in 2014, 24 in 2015, 68 in 2016, 19 in 2017, 25 in 2018, 6 units in 2019. We still have 2020 and 2021 left to go, but that was for a total of 204 units. So we're not building a lot of units, and all of those were moderate or above moderate. Not a single one of those were affordable. But I do want to give one caveat to that. When we do these reports to the state, we have to be able to substantiate that they're affordable. And so we are building a lot of what's called ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. And I think we want to encourage those, because I think a good number of those are probably affordable, maybe in the low, not primarily extremely low, but at least hopefully those would provide for some of those more affordable units. But the only way for us to count those would be if we actually were able to substantiate what the rent is, and staff doesn't have the time to do that kind of interview with the individual property owner. But I did want to make you aware that we are building a good number of ADUs as of late.
Thank you, Pierre. I appreciate it. And I think you brought up an excellent point that we need to keep in mind. Affordable housing here means something far, far different than it means in another part of the state. And affordable housing here, built correctly, will serve a wide spectrum of our housing needs for our population. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, council member, and well said. And I think that's what we're looking at here. It's really housing for the working families and individuals here in Placerville and in El Dorado County. I mean, within that, from what we've seen in the level of what people make, that's what would fit in almost exactly for a lot of those workers. So whether they're servers or cooks or teachers, as dentists, I mean, a lot of people fit into this category. But I don't know if Jeree is still on the line, but if she was, I'd open up her mic again to see if she had any sense on the distribution of, medium, low income, other the different categories, and what municipalities have in terms of a say over what that mix looks like. If she's on, it'd be great. If not, no worries there, obviously. But I would think she might be the one.
I don't see that she's
not on. Okay, that's fine. Vice Mayor.
Just one more comment. This is also the type of housing that we need for homeless, for people transitioning out of homeless. And that goes into those very low, if they can acquire a job or acquire the funding for housing. It's a critical need in that very aspect as well. So it's going to meet a lot of different needs in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Does anybody have, does anybody want to entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item 12.1.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Further comments? Seeing none. Ms. O'Connell, roll call, please.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Akerna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli is recused, so we'll go to Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that measure passes 4-0. And Councilmember Borelli can come out of hiding.
Okay. Hi there.
Hey, welcome back. Okay, we're going to move on to item 12.2. And that is consider placing a measure on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot, proposing the city treasurer position be changed from an elected position to an appointed position effective January 1st, 2024, and provide direction to staff. And Mr. Warren has this item for us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Over the past several years, the demands on the treasurer position have increased due to the complexities of governmental accounting, cash management, investments, and other workload demands. These demands require the city treasurer to be a seasoned professional with the necessary skills and experience to ensure the city's cash and investments are protected and handled with the greatest amount of care possible. Over the past 23 years, as you know, Kathy Tremblay has faithfully served as city treasurer. Prior to being elected as city treasurer, Ms. Tremblay served as the city's appointed accounting supervisor, which was a full-time position at that time. Ms. Tremblay retired as the full-time treasurer accounting supervisor on April 14, 2004, and continues to serve as the elected city treasurer and a part-time accounting supervisor about 7 hours a week, in addition to working as a part-time, excuse me, I already mentioned that. At some point, Ms. Trumbley will eventually fully retire as treasurer. With Ms. Trumbley's eventual retirement, staff is recommending that a measure be placed on the November 3rd ballot, proposing that the city treasurer position be changed from an elected position to an appointed position effective January 2024, or after the end of the upcoming 4-year term. The primary duties of the city treasurer include cash management and investment administration. The specific duties include review, approve deposits, cash deposits with the city's bank, review and approve city's accounts payable and payroll check registers that you see on your agenda every council meeting. So those are reviewed and approved by her before coming to you. Review and approve ACH or automated clearinghouse transfers. So these are, we used to call them wire transfers. They're electronic transfers of money. For example, when we pay our employer taxes to the IRS, that's done through an ACH transfer. Also to the state of California and other city vendors, we have a couple of our debt service that is paid through ACH transfer. And that's something that she does so assist with monthly cash reconciliation, perform daily cash management duties, just monitoring city cash flow, so on and so forth. Monitoring city's investments primarily through LAIF, Local Agency Investment Fund. Administer the city's transient occupancy tax, which is more part of the accounting supervisor duties. Performs central purchasing. Again, this is something that it's more in the accounting supervisor role, but that's something she does as well. Due to more transactions being performed electronically, the increasing threat of outside bank fraud, and a growing number of cash transactions overall, the need for a seasoned professional, which Kathy is, very well seasoned, is greater than ever. So at some point, when Ms. Trumbley retires, there's a need for someone at her caliber, not just somebody off the street that, you know, balances their checkbook, that somebody understands fund accounting and you know, a municipal cash management environment. So, and this is true in other cities as well. And the survey that we included in the staff report was really an opportunity that we saw. There was a survey done by the city of Hemet, and it's not comprehensive. Unfortunately, there's not a comprehensive list of each city and whether they're elected or not. But this survey that was done back in August of 2019 showed that of the 32 cities that responded, 21 or 65.63% were appointed, and 11 or 34.37% are elected. So we're finding that more and more cities, just over the years I've seen these surveys, this is probably one of the most recent, but the number of appointed is far outpacing the elected, what I've found. And that's because of the level of professionalism that's needed. A copy of the survey is included in your staff report. One of the critical things I want to point out, it was kind of raised through a question that Sue Robin asked. The treasurer position provides an important segregation of duties. That's a term we use in the accounting world. It's really important that the person that's receiving the cash, dispersing the cash, reconciling your cash, that isn't all one person. It needs to be segregated. And so the primary duty of the treasurer is to approve the receipt and disbursement of funds. So she handles the cash receipts, daily cash receipts go to the bank. So she's actually placing those in deposit. And then the checks, the check register that goes to you, she's approving that. So you also have your department heads reviewing that. Some of those are reviewed and approved by Cleve, myself, but ultimately you have, it's like a third party reviewing at a second set of eyes that's reviewing that and making sure. So it keeps me accountable. And so what it does is if you were to combine that with, say, my position, you actually lose the ability to monitor and detect fraud. It's actually a position that plays more of a controller role. And so personally, I feel it's important that the city maintain that position separately, and it's important that you have somebody that's seasoned. So with that, the cost of doing this, there is a nominal cost. When we go into the November election, the cost, the county allocates the cost to each agency that participates. Our share would be a little greater because of that measure if you were to approve it. And there's a little bit of staff time involved. You know, those costs we would estimate and build that into your proposed budget this fall. And with that, I know Mr. Driscoll, your city attorney, has some comments regarding the technicalities of actually placing a measure on the ballot. So I'd like to hand it over to John Driscoll. Talk.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Dave. Well, as they indicated in the staff report, the council does have the authority to place this measure on the ballot. You haven't placed a similar measure on the ballot within the last 11 months, so under the law, you have that ability. The issue came up about, well, how do we go about doing it? Because the position is up for election this year. So do we put it on the ballot that we have two competing measures in essence? One is the person or people, whoever they might be, seeking to be elected versus a measure that says it's going to be an appointed position. If you were to do that, basically the person who gets elected is going to supersede whatever is decided with respect to the measure. Technically, the person who is elected takes office before the ballot measure, even if it was passed, could become effective. And the council can only appoint if there's a vacancy. So there would be no vacancy in that office. It's getting a little technical, but bottom line is the only way this could work, since the position is up for election this year, is to have it become effective if it passes in 2024, or if there becomes a vacancy in the office. If the person who is elected decides they don't want to run or stay their full term and they leave, the council has the ability to appoint them, but also this measure, if passed, could become effective in that sort of a circumstance. So what I'm recommending is that, and we'll have to draft the ballot measure language, but what I'm recommending is that if it passes, it becomes effective in 2024 or upon a vacancy in the office, whichever would occur first.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, Dave. Council members, questions for staff at this point? Yes, Vice Mayor Thomas.
I would just like to second what Dave said, in that being a business owner and dealing with cash on a daily basis, the separation of money coming in and money going out is absolutely critical, because I've had some experience with some nefarious activities. And it's in those areas where if you're not keeping things tight in terms of accountability, that things can happen. And so my only concern is, and Dave, if we hire somebody, I assume, or do we have that same level of accountability, not being an elected official, but being a hired official? I suppose Cleve would do the hiring. Would that be correct? And would the council be involved in any of that in terms of making sure that accountability exists? Because it's so easy for that to go south.
If I might answer that, the council is the one who by statute is authorized to make the appointment, but the statute also says it can delegate that authority to the city manager.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this point? Okay, seeing none. Yes, Councilmember Borelli.
I don't have any questions, but I think I'm gonna ask Attorney Driscoll, or maybe Mark. I remember us talking, or maybe, and I wasn't on the council at the time, but I remember this was an issue many, many years ago. And if I'm remembering correctly, the reason that it didn't go to a vote is that there was a lot of pushback from the community. And I think if we're going to do so, if this does pass and we're going to present it, we have to give all the reasons that were given tonight, because the public really needs to understand why we're doing this, and not have what happened last time happen. So.
Thanks, Patty. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think Mr. Driscoll was going to answer because he was city manager, I believe, at that time.
Yes, I was.
And, it was the city clerk and the city treasurers, and I want to say it was on the same ballot measure.
Correct.
To make them both appointed, and the city clerk won, and the city treasurer didn't. So.
I didn't remember that it made
Yeah, they were both on.
Okay.
So.
But I know that there was a lot of pushback from the community.
To go back to everybody's concerns, one of the reasons that the city clerk, I think, was successful in making that an appointment was because of the fact that the city was growing. The technical and legal requirements of city clerk work was growing by leaps and bounds, and you could not count on someone who just kind of wanted to throw their hat in the ring and be the city clerk. It's become, a complete full-time job to do it correctly, and the citizens recognize that. So it goes to what you just said, Patty. If the same issues are true with all the financial concerns that Dennis and Dave and everyone has outlined, that you need a very high level of qualification to be a city treasurer. So hopefully that helps rattle the old days.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, seeing no other questions right now, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment.
Taking public comment from call-in user 2.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Okay, so on theory, I agree that these positions like city clerk, treasurer should probably be converted to appointed positions because they're becoming very technical and very specified. The job description is insane, and we don't want a Yahoo running for election and whatever. These are very specific positions. So I do, in theory, support putting them to appointed positions. I would just like to see some analysis of, okay, all of a sudden you're going, I don't know what the city treasurer is paid currently. I understand she's a retired annuitant and there's restrictions on hours and wages and yada, yada. We have a lot of retired annuitants serving city of Placerville. So if this is a very specified and particular position, what is this person going to be paid? Start thinking about it. Are you going to have to pay this person $150,000, $250,000 a year, plus retirement, plus all the other benefits? And what is the ultimate cost benefit analysis like over 10 years, 50 years? Start thinking about that. When you write the language of the petition, you're going to have to consider that. I can see this, just my theory of what's going to happen. Kathy Tremblay will win the next election. She will resign the next day. You guys will appoint a new person, and that person will take over. But what will that position pay? And what is the long-term cost to the city given a public officer with full benefits and everything else? So I'm just wondering about that. I'm sure you guys haven't analyzed that, but something to think about. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Last call for public comment on 12.2. see no further comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Regina. We'll bring it close public comment and bring it back to the council for further discussion or action. Oh, before we do that, Dave, did you want to just hit on any of the points in terms of the salary and then versus if this was an appointed position going forward?
You bet. So the current stipend for the city treasurer is currently $2,184. And so that's just for the treasurer duties. And then the accounting supervisor is currently compensated at $22.26 per hour, which right now it's about 7 hours a week. So pretty minimal. Depending on if the council wants to place a measure on the ballot and what actually occurs after that would determine, how we proceed. But yeah, we would definitely, if there were a change in that position to appointed, we would want to bring back the job description, talk about who the treasurer reports to, whether it's, the city manager, council, or just the council, or so on and so forth. Those are things that we can bring back as options to the city council at that time.
And would the salary be somewhat in line with what we're paying already, or would there be a dramatic difference?
It really depends on who's serving as treasurer. If Ms. Trumbley continued, I don't see it changing anytime soon. If we appointed somebody, it could be a part-time person. It could be an existing staff person that you assign as part of their duties, and their job description would have to change. We do have some seasoned staff internally that could do it, but that's really up to the council and of course the people. If first of all, kind of get ahead of ourselves, but if a ballot measure was placed in the ballot, if it was approved to allow for appointment of treasurer, and then if Ms. Trumbley resigned or retired. There's a lot of moving parts there, but we would be very transparent and give the public and the council an opportunity to weigh in on each piece of those.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Further questions and comments? Yes, Councilmember Acuna.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave, I just want to clarify. Could you repeat again what the stipend is for our current city treasurer?
I'm kind of embarrassed. It's $2,184 a year.
A year.
Yes.
$2,100 a year.
With benefits?
And some change.
With benefits, so insurance or?
Is there?
The actual treasurer position does not come with any health and welfare benefits. The part-time retired annuitant came with minimal. It had some health and welfare. It has health and welfare benefits, but minimal.
Dave, this may have been before your time, but do you remember when we had city clerk as an elected position? What was the stipend on that? The days before Susan Zito was city clerk.
I recall it was exactly the same.
It was the same. I remember that.
Wow, so they were expected to do all those duties for very, very minimal reimbursement, compensation.
I don't think they have the same duties as they have now.
No. Okay.
John, did you want to make a comment, or did Mark hit it?
Mark said pretty much what I was going to say, because Susan was the city clerk, became appointed. Susan became the appointed city clerk and stayed on, and there was not a change in the compensation for that position, but she was already an employee receiving benefits. So Mark had it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you both.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve the recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, council member.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none. Ms. O'Connell, roll call, please.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That measure passes. Okay, moving on to item 12.3. That's ratifying a construction contract change orders 1, 2, 3, and approving a construction contract change order number 4, and the total combined amount of $429,150 with Cox Engineering for the Mosquito Road stabilization, Clay Street city limit project, and approving $150,000 budget appropriation from the Sewer Enterprise Fund contingency for unforeseen expenditures, approving $58,000 budget appropriation from the Water Enterprise Fund contingency for unforeseen expenditures, and approving a $117,000 budget appropriation from the Water Enterprise Fund unassigned fund balance for the said project. And Ms. Neves has this report for us tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. The item before you this evening proposes to ratify the change orders as listed by the Mayor, 1 through 3, and approve change order number 4 for a total combined amount of $429,150 with the current construction contract. As you're aware, Council approved the construction contract with CE Cox Engineering at the January 14th meeting earlier this year, which feels like 14 years ago now. And the work has progressed amidst the COVID-19 restrictions and concerns. Staff has also been working concurrently on the adjacent projects, which have been further delayed due to COVID-19 impacts and restrictions and some transactional delays, specifically the Placerville Station Park and Bus project located adjacent to Mosquito Road. As the project has progressed for the Mosquito contract, it's also been extremely sobering looking at the existing utilities in the ground. We've been finding that they're actually in worse condition than what we originally thought. And for example, during the tie-in that occurred a couple weeks ago, the system that was to be abandoned was running at an operating pressure of about 100 PSI. However, less than a day later, when the contractor came back in to essentially de-energize or drain the line to cap and abandon it, there was no residual pressure remaining at all, which means that there was a sizable active leak in the line. So the sewer collection system also is in equally bad condition and with its own unfortunate leaks as well. The observed unstable conditions of the existing utilities, coupled with the delay in delivering the next portion of those utility improvements, led staff to look at opportunities to advance the portions of work from the Placerville Station 2 project into the current construction contract. To evaluate options, the city requested a quote from the contractor for the utilities, which are the same items of work and descriptions contained in the Mosquito Road contract, and found it came actually at a savings of about $105,000 and will place the needed improvements sooner rather than later for immediate service to the community and reduction of maintenance. One such example is the sewer connection into Mosquito Road from the existing park and bus lot. It is actually a weekly maintenance issue for Public Works, and we're very grateful to them for their patience in keeping on that. Also, CCOs 1 through 4, as I mentioned, total $429,150 with recommended budget appropriations from the Sewer and Water Enterprise Funds for the proposed sewer and water improvements to support this Measure H and L contract. I do want to be specific that Measure H and Measure L supply the majority of the funding for this project. This was actually the largest individual locally funded construction contract that we've put out thanks to Measure L. And therefore it's actually fulfilling its intended use. Staff's recommendations are summarized before you this evening, and that concludes my verbal report. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Neves. Any questions for Rebecca at this moment? Yes, Vice Mayor.
With this added cost on this project or reallocation or allocation of these funds out of these contingencies and unforeseen, and as well as the item 4 unassigned fund balance, is this going to affect any of the other projects that are slated for the next year, or whether it's a Spring Street or any other projects going forward?
No, and actually that was one of the intentions from taking it from those funding sources. You know, the enterprise funds are available to support the operations of our sewer and water systems. They're collected through the rate collection, et cetera. And this actually will preserve some of those funds related to other projects such as spraying a mosquito.
And could these funds be used for other things than something like this?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other, you took my question, Vice Mayor, but yes, that was the exact question I had as well. Any other questions or comments at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Now taking public comment from call-in user 2.
Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. So these are questions. Hopefully someone will write them down. Did the Measure H&L committee look at this, given the COVID shutdown, or is this fully staff directed? The Park and Ride and Mosquito Road to city limits, I assume are both cleared with their environmental documents. So if they are, I have no problem with the cost benefit of having the contractor on site continue with the Park and Ride section. I like the savings of $100,000. The only question I have is I watch these guys. There's a 3, maybe a 4-man crew. And the only thing I want to see is that they get it done before October, way before October, so that the road can be repaved before October. So you might save $100,000 on the project, but if this thing gets bumped into next year for paving, then it might not be a benefit. So please, if the contractor is going to save you $100,000, please tell them to bring 12 more guys on the crew. The question about the Park and Ride, it was hard to tell from the city project plans. Is there going to be a fence like near the sidewalk, like an ugly fence that like borders in the Park and Ride? If yes, I'd say please scrap that. And I'm seeing fire hydrants that are being taped off as they're obviously working on the water line. They have to shut off the fire hydrants. So how long does this last? If there was a fire in my house and the fire hydrant is off, does the fire department know about that, and where do they know to go to hook to a active fire hydrant? And if those shutoffs can be reduced to like 1 day or 2 day shutoffs, that would be a blessing. Thank you. I have a lot of questions on this, but that's just kind of the basics. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to call for last comment. I'm sorry, last call for this item, 12.3. In the meantime, I will read a comment provided by Sue Rodman. She writes, "A huge shout out for Placerville City's engineering department. It's great to see our engineers finding ways to bring the puzzle pieces together for our sewer, water, and street systems. And save money in the process, not to mention their ability to bring Caltrans and PG&E along. We are so blessed to have this extremely competent team willing to work for Placerville. Good job."
Thank you, Regina.
And I don't see any further public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, great, thank you, and we'll bring it back to the council. Sounds like that answered maybe one of the questions in terms of the Measure H&L. I don't know if they actually oversaw it, but certainly I know Sue wouldn't miss the opportunity to review it herself in the interim. So Rebecca, I know there was a couple of questions there if you want to make any comments.
Yeah, so Measure H&L committee was aware that we were pursuing this as an option. At the time, this was actually not something we decided in a bubble. We've actually been working on it for about 3 months. And we did bring it to the committee's attention in several of our meetings. When we finally got the amount for the CCO, we actually didn't have also a Measure HL meeting planned, which would have been necessitating the recommendation to council. And so I'd like to give a shout out to Assistant City Manager, Director of Finance, Dave Warren, for coming up with a solution to keep us moving, because to support some of the comments from the caller, we do want to keep this project on track and on schedule. They're actually, though they may be small with only 3 crew, they are mighty. They have not missed a working day, and they are actually right on schedule, all 3 of them. So I'm really proud of how they're working with just what they have, because, you know, it's not enough that it's, you know, local businesses are getting impacted by COVID. You know, the contractors are impacted too. They have to observe physical distancing. They get folks who get to a place where they don't feel comfortable showing up. And so, you know, to C.E. Cox's credit, he has found his ride or die crew, and they are out there every single day. And when he needs more, he manages to come up with more. But he's actually still on schedule. And then related to the environmental clearance, yes, actually the utilities that are described in change order number 4 were environmentally cleared in August of 2018, and that clearance is on the city's website. And it is still intended that the road would be paved prior to October. It actually, you may recall, council gave staff permission to bid Spring Street and Mosquito concurrently. We've reached a point where we're actually, because of the COVID restrictions, we were working towards virtually bidding. We are right now, thanks to the patience of Director Zeller, we're doing our first test virtual bid right now with the Historic City Hall vertical shoring and bracing project. And so once that one's complete, we've got virtual bid down, and then I feel more comfortable about releasing a substantially larger contract, which would be the paving for Spring and Mosquito. And then answering the question regarding a fence near the sidewalk, no, there is no fence located there. We're actually putting in a Class 1 path, which is funded through CMAQ funds on the project as well as part of Placerville Station. Placerville Station has 2 federal funding sources. They have an FTA grant that's provided from FTA to Regional Transit, and then we're a sub-recipient. And then the city saw that the park and ride components were actually underfunded, and we prepared and submitted a CMAQ application to El Dorado County Transportation Commission, and we're grateful that they awarded us that amount of money. And regarding fire hydrants being taped off, yeah, it is an iterative process when you work on a water main. We do keep in constant contact with El Dorado County Fire, not only on this project, but actually we have another project where we've had to do some fire hydrant de-energizing as well on Upper Broadway. So we do keep in contact. We do keep them notified when those come along. And I think that was all the questions provided earlier. I'm happy to answer or clarify anything else.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Do we have further questions? Do we have entertain a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll entertain a motion that we move to adopt.
Yes,
Pardon me, Councilmember Borelli. I'm sorry, I was muted, or I would have gotten in there before Councilmember Borelli started. A couple questions and a comment. When are we scheduled to pave this part of Mosquito Road out to the city line?
We are scheduled to pave up to the city limits. That is part of the Spring Mosquito project that I mentioned with the paving. So that portion of paving goes from Clay Street up to the city limits, and that one is scheduled, I believe, for August.
So it hasn't been out. We've got to go through the bid process.
We do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
We were learning and building the airplane as we were flying it on virtual bid.
And I guess that would be the same question for this Placerville Station 2. When is that going to go out to bid?
Subsequent to the Spring Street Mosquito contract, we're actually working through some of the items related to utility relocation right now, specifically some of the Buy America variances. It's still kind of an issue, and so we're working with PG&E on utility coordination. We have some delays related to obtaining a Caltrans encroachment permit. We are making some headway on that as of this week, actually, which was great. But it was getting to the point where it wasn't looking like it was going to go out to bid and for a little while still. So we, in opening up the trenches, we saw the utilities needed to be addressed as soon as possible.
Okay, so we're counting on PG&E and Caltrans to be job coordinators with us again.
More like partners that we, I prefer we take the friendly elephant approach. We just kind of lean on them a little bit and smile.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. A couple comments, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
This is not meant to be critical or place blame in an old town. When you open something up, our city engineer has done the only thing that is available to her, and that is keep digging until you find something worth connecting to. And so it makes perfect sense that she has no good engineering alternative but to come to us with what she's exactly asking for in 12.3. Mm-hmm. That's to move from one project into another, utilizing some cost savings with the contractor that's on site, so we can get away, literally stop finding rotten pipe. So that is a part of history that we don't hear a whole lot of folks talk about. But that is our engineering department's daily life, and our public works crew's daily life is making these 100-year-old systems functionable. What is really worrying me is that these big projects, because of the nature of the age of this city, are really eating into our city engineering staff resources and our Measure L funding. Again, the city engineer had no other choice but to recommend that we shuffle the deck again. And in my mind, yeah, we are taking money away from other projects in Measure L and Measure H, because they're all going to now wait. From a purely political standpoint, I know I've been promising people for 3 years that we were going to get Spring Street paved. I've been promising people for over 3 years we were going to get Mosquito Road paved and get the Placerville Drive station done. That particular piece of Mosquito Road is an absolute disgrace. You know, in this bid, we ought to ask the contractor to throw in another $10,000, because from what I'm hearing, Placerville Station won't go this year as far as getting paved. And we're going to ask the public to drive on that piece of cow trail that we call Mosquito Road there at the intersection of Highway 50 off ramps at the stop sign. That is just despicable, and it's not anybody's fault, but yet again, it falls to us, I guess, as a council, to at least be honest with the voters at Measure L, and our promise to the voters that we were going to be responsible and do some small projects mixed in with these big projects. All those tax-paying properties along Broadway. Nick Stone and the Public Works crew added a steel plate by McDonald's, which is actually an improvement over the city paving. 3 years ago or so, when we were successful with Measure L, we all stood out in front of the fairgrounds, or a bunch of us did, and celebrated with Doug Veerkamp as did one of our quick projects that we promised the public we were going to do at least a couple of every year, small paving projects that were really going to improve in the neighborhood streets. And at the same time, we would work on our big projects. And I think perhaps it's the council's responsibility that we really haven't withheld that or held up to that since then. There was a list that about the second year of Measure L where we talked about the concerns for we don't have patching because Measure L doesn't pay for patching. So we had a list of streets that we were going to throw away the blacktop and expect to only get 5 or 10 years use out of these streets. And because of the same thing that Rebecca's running into, we couldn't afford to do the underground, but the streets were such high volume and so bad that we were going to do them. And I think we maybe did 1 or 2 more, and now that has stopped. And again, because our engineering department is stretched to its capacity, I don't, as a council member, see us getting back to those again. I have been bugging Cleve for 2 years. The first 300 or 400 feet of Bedford Street is an absolute cow trail. Lewis Street going into the Little League Park, one of the greatest Little League fields in all of the foothill areas. Again, cow trail road. You know, what happened to our list of these quick, fast paved jobs that we were going to do? And that was a promise that we've made to the voters. And I know I have promised, as I say, for myself personally, for several years now. And I don't, it's just the way it is, but we need to get this situation under control, or we're going to lose the support of our voters in Measure L. So with that, I'd go ahead and make a motion to approve item 12.3 and thank the city engineer for doing the best she can with what is served up on her plate on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mark.
I'll go ahead and second that.
All right, we have a first and a second. I'll just echo Mark's comments. I think we need to, and I mean, we have COVID, we have budget deficits, we have everything that's could go wrong, has gone wrong in 2020. But we do need to look at some of these smaller streets for some patch jobs, for things that we can show the voters that what we said is true, even though we did run into some difficulties. And so it doesn't have to be next meeting or even the next meeting after that, but to the extent that we can have a game plan about how we can start getting to some of those at the same time, I think is very important in having that discussion. Vice Mayor Thomas.
Thank you. I think we also have to be cognizant and responsible to the citizens that have agreed to fund this, that we use the money wisely, and that we don't just jump right in and pave streets that we're going to have to tear up in 2 or 3 years because we have sewer leaks too. It's, you know, this road work is not sexy, and it doesn't always go as planned. And in my opinion, and watching what we're doing, it's, you know, and we're dealing with old pipes and old sewer pipes and water pipes, and it's just it is a messy business. And I really don't fault the city engineer for having to reshuffle the deck every time something goes wrong, because it happens. And, you know, making promises is a risky business when it comes to roads and construction and that whole thing. I agree with Mark that we did come forward with this, and this is the reality of dealing with small town old pipes and old sewer pipes that in roads that are deteriorating. It is a reshuffling of the deck every time one of these things happens to figure out what we do next and what's the most meaningful project and what needs to happen, because all these roads are deteriorating at different rates. So it is important to look at how we do this and be wise and smart with the money. And that's, you know, and our Measure L committee, or Measure H and Measure L committee are on this, and they are recognizing and working hard to manage the community's money. And we put a lot of trust in them. And I know those are really good people and they're doing that work. And so I don't want to discount the efforts that they're putting into this either, in terms of speaking on behalf of the citizens of this community. So thank you. And thank you for all the efforts. And Mark, I appreciate your comments too, because, you know, they're equally as important to recognize what we're doing here. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think part of it too is that we're just going to have to make the assumption, maybe what it is going forward is, on these big projects, we're going to run into problems underground, and they're going to take longer than what we probably think they're going to take, because all these pipes are 100 years older or around those times. So it's a safe assumption that it isn't going to be a clean project just going forward with a simple pave, that we're going to find problems. So it's probably more realistic to think about that. Yes, Councilmember Acuna.
Thank you. And thank you, Dennis. I appreciate your comments. And maybe it's really on the council. It's really on the council and the city manager. And these were projects that we all promised as a group, with the city engineer and the city manager and everybody. And this is back to the beginning days. So maybe our job would be to reset that message this fall put it on ourselves to show everybody where we're at in 2020, what the deck looks like and why it does, and let them know that we are equally frustrated. But the transparency, I think, it would be important, and that should come from the council. So maybe a workshop that somewhere around the fall that says, hey, here's why this did get done and why that didn't get done. And again, that would be on ourselves to take that task on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, Councilmember Borelli.
I agree with you. You know, it certainly has been laid out before us that none of the projects that we've had have gone, you know, smoothly, and it's just going to keep happening. Mark said it, you said, we know it, and I think that's a great idea to maybe reassess and, you know, talk to the citizens and tell them exactly. And we might be able to pull a couple of them out just to show, you know, as examples or something. So I agree.
Rebecca.
So we do provide an annual update to the community in our January utility bills. And, you know, we do just this year happened to be a little bit of an unusual beast, but we are looking at coming back forward in the fall already with some proposed project lists, because we weren't sure on what we would receive related to Measure H&L for this next coming year, given the uncertainty of the situation with COVID. So, but we do have, I do want to remind that there are some excellent smaller paving projects that Public Works has done a great job getting those out. The one that specifically comes to mind is Lower Main Street. Lower Main Street was very precarious, and Nick Stone did an excellent job working with Caltrans to make it a complete project by including the portion of state right-of-way in that contract for a type 2 slurry, and that was a big deal. So we do have some smaller projects coming forward, and you know, I'm from staff's perspective, we're extremely grateful that you entrust us with having some flexibility to shuffle the deck. For example, you know, we do have some contingency left in this contract if we don't find any more skeletons in the ground, so to speak, as a joke, but not really. Hopefully we don't find any skeletons.
Don't say that.
Join some artifacts.
But we do have some contingency funds that we could potentially use for doing some carryover patch paving in the areas as needed. The other thing too is, again, back to the gratitude of allowing staff to shuffle the deck every once in a while. One of the projects that we had looked at proposing prior to COVID was repaving Smith Flat Road, or at least getting that ball rolling. On the Upper Broadway project, you know, we've been able to come up with some pretty substantial savings. And one of the ways that we're going to roll that savings back into the project is actually repaving the portion of Smith Flat Road that's in state right-of-way. You know, we have an opportunity to get an encroachment permit through that, which would otherwise be a pretty tedious and long drawn out process, but we managed to push that one through. Thank you. And we were able to look at potentially repaving Smith Flat Road, as well as a couple of little areas also for improvements. So we do have some smaller paving projects, and we hear you loud and clear, and we'll keep working away at this.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for highlighting those other projects. That's very important for people to know. Okay, we have a first and a second. Do we have any other comments? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead for a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 12.4, review letter received from SMUD regarding potential annexation of El Dorado County, Placerville. So, and then Mr. Morris has this for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is coming back to you. We brought it to you in the form of a written correspondence back in January, I believe it was, and shared the letter with you. And it was requested that we come back and have somewhat more of a thorough review of the letter. So I've tried to outline the specific points in the letter, but I'll go through just briefly. Our request that we went to SMUD with, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, was for them whether or not they would consider annexing El Dorado County basically into their service area. And this letter was in response to that. And I guess I could make it easy and just say, they said no.
Right. In no uncertain terms.
Yeah, there are some reasons that they outlined fairly well. It has to make sense for them. It has to be a good addition to their service area. And based on a few factors that they outline in there, they do not feel that it would be a good annexation for them, that would be a benefit to their existing customers, and potentially even would potentially not be a good benefit for El Dorado County customers. Specifically, a couple of things they talk about is the condition of the infrastructure in this area, and the fact that they would be purchasing infrastructure that would take quite a bit of work to bring up to their standards. The other thing that they talk about in here is the fact that this is more of a high fire danger area. As we've seen in the past few years, fires that have been caused by utility lines that have been referenced. They note that that brings also an increased risk to their district if they were to take on this area. So those are two that I will name specifically. They go in here through here and talk about the process. It's a very lengthy process. And they talk about the fact that PG&E would most likely fight that process very strongly to prevent the annexation from happening. They talk about that they are restricted in how they can spend money on a campaign that would be part of a ballot measure to allow them to annex this area. And PG&E, as an investor-owned utility, does not have the same restrictions on how much money they can spend and how they can promote those ballot measures. So it would really be an uphill battle for them. And in the end, their comment was, I'll read a couple of these. The very last one: accordingly, we cannot state with confidence that SMUD's annexation of El Dorado County would provide benefits to both SMUD customers and residents of El Dorado County. And that was putting it mildly based on some of the other information that is in the report. So I did try to comment a little bit, and in the end that I've been asked, okay, well, what do we do now? Or is there a what is there do we do now? One of the avenues that we've explored and a little bit with the county is community choice aggregate programs. Which is basically that we would, as a community choice aggregate, or as a city, if you want to put that way, or a county, we would actually purchase the electricity, and then we would use PG&E distribution lines to serve that electricity to our customers, to the citizens of Placerville or El Dorado County. That is a program that is working in a couple of areas. Yolo County has a community choice aggregate, as does Placer County. We have spoken to both of them, and Yolo County did not seem as interested because we're not that good of a mix for them. They're down in the valley as us being up in the foothill. Placer County did express some interest, and we do have some ongoing discussions with them of how that might work, but they are interested. Some people ask, well, that really doesn't help us in terms of if there's a power outage or something like that, the transmission lines go down that we're probably getting our power through. And you're absolutely right, that would not help us. Where it may help us is in the future, if we're part of a group like the Placer County Community Choice Aggregate, there may be should something happen to PG&E where they were broken up or something in the future, that may give us an advantage in forming a new area to start up and provide our own power through the community choice aggregate. So it's not a major item, but it does perhaps provide us some additional steps going forward should that come about in the past. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this, and we can go from there.
Thank you, Cleve. Council members, any comments or questions for Cleve? Okay, seeing none at this point, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment.
Mr. Mayor, I don't see any public comment at the moment, but I will read a comment submitted by Sue Rodman.
Okay.
She says, I am deeply disappointed that SMUD does not see value in annexation for El Dorado County. I don't blame SMUD for not wanting to take on neglected PG&E infrastructure or a political battle with PG&E. I remember a number of years ago when El Dorado County was given the opportunity to vote for annexation into electric service from SMUD. PG&E pulled out all the stops to defeat that at the ballot box. It was an unfair contest since SMUD was and still is not allowed to campaign politically. Now it is up to us, the abused and neglected PG&E ratepayers, to hold PG&E responsible, to petition the state, the Public Utility Commission, our state and federal legislators, to call PG&E to account and force PG&E to live up to the duty of any utility to provide safe and reliable service to all their customers. In 10 years of living in Montana, where it can snow 4 feet overnight, I was never without electricity from Montana Power for longer than 8 hours, even living 15 miles out of town. This is the kind of service PG&E, a monopoly utility, should provide. Obviously, this will only happen if we make it happen. And I see we have a caller wanting to speak. Call in user 2, please.
Good evening, Mayor. So looking at the SMUD response, they're basically telling us to take a hike. I don't blame them because they don't, the liability of moving up into our area doesn't make sense for them. So I understand why they would say no with a giant H in front of it. So I don't know what the other possibilities are. Is PG&E still in bankruptcy? Is there still the ability of a local jurisdiction to create their own power company? I would hope somebody could answer these legal questions, because it looks like SMUD is saying, don't ask us, we will fight you. And so that kind of looks like a dead-end road. But what are the other options? So that's my question. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last call for public comment on 12.4. Further comments, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, thank you, Regina. We'll bring it back to council, close public comments. Cleve, we had a question in regards to what our choices are. I think you sort of outlined it at this point, what those are, but if you wanted to go into any other detail at this point, I'll add a couple of comments after.
No, I will just state that, you know, it is possible. There is a potentially feasible scenario where you say, well, let's form our own utility. And there are examples of that. I mean, City of Reading, City of Roseville, City of Lodi, those are all examples of city-owned municipal utilities that provide power to their own cities. However, they got it started a long time ago. I'm not sure all of the specifics even behind all of those and how they started. What we would be required to do basically would be to go to PG&E and say, we want to buy your distribution facilities in the city of Placerville. Not unheard of, not that it can't be done, but number one, PG&E has to be willing to sell. Number two, we have to be willing to buy. We have to have the money to buy, the wherewithal to put that together. So there's a lot of pieces that would have to fall into place. I know that I will tell you that the community choice aggregate in Yolo County actually made a bid for PG&E's facilities and offered them an amount, and PG&E basically said, no, it's not for sale. And it kind of ended at that point. I believe that, you know, there may be some hope that something happens, that PG&E gets broken up. There was a lot of talk about that about, you know, maybe 6 months to 8 months ago. it's kind of quieted down with everything else that has been going on this spring. I haven't heard much about it, but there was talk about, from governmental agencies and proposals to try and break up PG&E that might have afforded better for something like that to happen. So I think our efforts right now should be to consider, as one of the Ms. Rodman mentioned, continue to put pressure on the PUC and PG&E to perform. Councilmember Acuna mentioned that we did have a meeting with our representative from PG&E last week, I guess it was, with the mayor and Councilmember Acuna, and expressed our concerns and where we go. But there's definitely not an easy or a simple path going forward that would say we could move towards having our own municipal utility. I do, again, want to emphasize, if the opportunity is there, that we were to join the Placer County Community Choice Aggregate. That may be a step that moves us forward. But it's still a long road ahead to ever get to that point where we might consider something like that. So,
thank you. Patty.
You're talking about that aggregate. If we were, did you say we purchased the power from their lines, or we purchased their lines? I'm not quite sure what you.
Under the community choice aggregate, we simply purchase power, and there's options of where we purchase that. We go out on the market and you can purchase power, and then you distribute it. You actually have PG&E distribute that power for you for a cost.
Oh, okay. So one other question I have for all of you that have been attending these meetings, what degree of, and maybe this is naive, but what degree of sincerity are you getting out of this on their part? We, as ratepayers and stuff, we get all the written paraphernalia and stuff that they send out, and it sounds like they're making really good strides and that they're really trying to right a wrong. Do you get that from them in these meetings that you're attending?
I'll have them. Well, I don't know, Mark, you want to go first? I mean, from my perspective, I think certainly Brandon is talking to us in good faith in terms of what he hopes the company will be able to do in our area. Obviously, he's a cog in a much bigger system.
Right.
On what ultimately will be able to happen for us. I think it is going to be incumbent upon us to continue to use all the powers that we have to work with the PUC, to work with our legislators, and to work with PG&E directly to really underline and, like I said, use any levers that we have in terms of political or regulatory pressure to ensure that we can at least mitigate some of these PSPSs going forward and get them to take care of their infrastructure in a way that would mitigate these PSPSs happening going forward, as well as just giving our ratepayers some certainty and our city some certainty. We've had conversations about the Main Street and the ability for Marshall Hospital to be able to get power during a PSPS event. And they've talked about other areas in El Dorado County, sort of these microgrids. But it's that main transmission line off of Mo Flat that we really need to have them take care of. But I'll kind of stop there. But Mark, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add, or Cleve.
No, I think you did an excellent job, Mr. Mayor. It's we will know here in the next couple of weeks. We should have the formal presentation from PG&E with all the county players and their personnel. And we'll learn a lot when that event takes place. They are committed to reducing the number of power safety shutoffs. And I think you're absolutely correct. We need to engage our electeds at the state. And we need to keep pushing the fact that we are in the boundary between these north and south wind events. For a change, we're on the right side of the fence. The winds don't blow here much.
Right.
We just need to convince PG&E of that.
But I mean, besides that, I'm talking about all the other things. Is the pressure that I really thought it started with the governor on down, and I'm not too sure that we're kind of easing up. I don't know, but
No.
that's what I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, the latest in Sacramento is basically they will emerge out of bankruptcy. I mean, it does not look like there's any serious effort afoot to break them into any smaller parts anymore. And I think part of it is just the practicality of it is, okay, so you inherited all these really bad infrastructure projects. Whoever you are going to be, what do you do with it and how do you pay for it? And so nobody really, I mean, I don't even think the governor really wants to have that liability on the state's books for like a state takeover. And then the mayor of San Jose had an effort that really, they talked to a lot of different municipalities about some kind of municipalized system, but I don't know that ever went anywhere further. So I think what we have to work with is a PG&E going forward. Mark, any other comment?
Yeah, given the time this evening and the fact that we've got quite a bit more work to do, a couple of points. This SMUD letter really very clearly outlines, and you could say if the city of Placerville wanted to take over, you could put anybody's name on that, and they're saying all of that technological cost, liability, all is very clearly spelled out. This is going to become the big question in a couple of months when the wind starts to blow and it gets hot. Everybody's going to start asking us, what about SMUD? And I want to thank, again, Cleve and Don Ashton and Supervisor Bierkamp for meeting. I mean, we got to meet with Arlen Orchard, the Chief Executive Officer of SMUD. We had the head person from SMUD here in El Dorado County some months ago with one of his lead legal people. So I would suggest we make sure that we put this on the city's website someplace with a real clear heading on it so people can find it, because this will be a big issue with every one of us as the power shutoff season approaches it. We have gone through the work and gotten a very clear answer from SMUD. The other thing, I think Michael Drobish asked a question about why don't we just get rid of them. The city would have to do the same thing. It would be tens of millions of dollars to buy PG&E out. It would be an adverse condemnation. We would be fighting to get a system that SMUD doesn't want to touch because it's already in such a delayed state of repair and maintenance. So it would be hugely irresponsible to go after something like that. But we need to make sure that we build a little link or something that people can get to see that we have indeed done the work, had the meeting, got a really clear letter from SMUD that outlines the process, and get those answers out. And the thing about Cleve mentioned these other options is everything relies on transmitting that power through some section of the PG&E system. So if their transmission system goes down, we can call it whatever we want. We won't have power.
Right.
So,
well, but my thinking is that, yeah, we can show this letter to the people and everything, and we can absorb the letter, but it's not helping the whole situation. So I think you're right. We just need to keep the pressure on, and how that's done. Michael's saying with our electives and stuff, they're certainly aware of it. They've been aware of it. What are they doing? I mean, I think we need to demand more, have them tell us, what are you doing? Where are we at?
I think you're right, Patty. I think those are valid questions for our representatives. Okay, well, this is basically a receive and file, correct? I mean, we know, I think Mark's idea is good, put it up there for people to know. And I think for the public, we're looking at all of our options. The CCAs, whatever that might come our way in the future, but at the same time, trying to keep as much pressure as we can on PG&E to do the right thing as we move forward here.
and maybe Cleve and I can put together some of the simple basics that we went through last year with the shutoffs and the SMUD question and the why don't we buy them, or why don't we boot them out kind of question, so we can at least have that all captured.
Right. I think that's a good
reduce
idea.
some frustrations.
Yep. That's good. Okay, any other comments on 12.4? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to council reports, item 13, and the El Dorado County Transit Authority.
Patty, you wanted to? No, I'll go ahead and do the report.
Well, I was just going to say, and the whole meeting was about slashing their budget. I mean, it was just, and it was so, to me, it was just so disheartening and sad to see you talk about people having to face budget issues. Transit is really, and what they're slashing, and I commend them for what they've had to do. Go ahead, Mark, if you want to add something to that.
No, I think you pretty well captured it just briefly. The ridership is down over 75%. They are looking at significant reductions in staffing playing out between now and early October. They're also looking for, verifying that they're still going to get state and federal funds, that those funds aren't going to disappear. So very, very difficult job. Commend the new director, Matt Mock. He's doing a great job, and is doing a very, very difficult job. His first year as executive director, and he has really had to step up. And so let's hope that things come to some sort of solutions quickly, because these
and it's involving layoffs for them too, so sad.
Okay, thank you both. Transportation Commission.
Well, we approved the budget, the work program, and we heard about all our Placerville projects, which Rebecca Neves has shared with us already tonight. We got a report on the hotspot, and there's still, the study is still going for potential mitigations for that, and we should know the end of summer. And the sad news is that our wonderful Joni Rice is retiring, and she's been the assistant there for years and years. I don't know, the whole place is just going to fall apart. But anyway, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you, Patty.
There'll be no meeting in July.
Thank you. LAFCO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We met earlier, well, excuse me, we met late last month, and the notable action that we took was we approved a contract for an outside consultant to perform a municipal service review for our countywide fire districts. They anticipate having that project completed within a year, and they will be looking at service levels, spheres of influence, etc. So this is something that will hopefully provide information for the fire districts, the citizens, and all the different elected boards and what have you. So looking forward to seeing that process started and getting the information compiled.
Okay, thank you, Mark. SACOG will meet next week on Thursday. So Fire Safe Council.
They just continue to explore ways to engage the community and help. They just trying so hard to get the information out and the importance of ways and why they need to prepare for the people for property protection and wildlife fires. And it's an ongoing thing. There'll be, just check our website. They're going to contribute to that and let people know, and they're really working hard to cover all their bases. So, but fire season is upon us.
Yep, already. Thank you, Patty. Okay, we'll move on to item 14 with the request for future agenda items. Yes, Councilmember Acuna.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two this evening. One would be for Cleve to bring back the status of the Lincoln Highway project. And we had the generous offer of donating one of the actual Lincoln Highway monuments. And I think Cleve had found a great spot down on Main Street right along the Lincoln Highway. If we could get that wrapped up. I know there was some sign donations and what have you that were going to be a part of that. So I'd hate to see us lose that effort. I know we spent some time on it last year. The other thing, a much more serious request would be a report on the Lumsden Ranch property. and what the status is of the fire safe clearing work. I would also like to add an adjoining parcel, which was formerly known as the Cedar Bluff project. It's to the south and the west of the Lumsden Ranch. There's probably about 40 acres left, owned by the Casper Development Company over in Auburn. It hasn't been cleared in probably 20 years now.
Right.
I think it's really, I would really appreciate knowing how we're doing it with Lumsden Ranch and those out of town investors.
Sounds good. Any opposition to those? All right, seeing none. Any other requests for agenda items? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to city manager and staff reports. And I'll kind of, I'll skip ahead because he's always patiently with us, and Chief Wren has to be, but we'll move to Chief Cordero first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your package, you'll see the monthly stats for Station 25, both engine and medic. And as you'll note with the comparisons over the monthly tallies, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have experienced about a 20% drop off in call volume over the last couple of months. Here in the last couple of weeks, things have kind of started to resume back to normal call volume. And I would expect that January, those numbers will probably edge back up to where they typically are at. With that, if there's any questions from the council, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief Cordero? Yes, Vice Mayor Thomas.
Has this COVID hit you financially as of yet? The fire service?
You know, for our fire district in particular, the bulk of our funding comes from property tax and ad valorem rates. So we haven't seen an impact, you know, budget-wise. Any impacts, you know, that we may see, we would anticipate would be in a year or two. On the operational side, we did have a fairly large increase in supplies, mainly in the arena of PPE that we did purchase, but we were working with the county EOC, and there's also a couple other grant opportunities that we've submitted for to recoup some of our costs for the PPE for our personnel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Cordero. Any other questions? Well, Chief, always glad to have you with us, and thank you for the report.
Thank you.
We'll move to item 15.1, Chief Wren.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. We did have a member of the public with their hand raised for that last.
Sorry, that's right. Okay. We'll open it up for public discussion.
Okay, call in user 2, please.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Just for a future agenda item, I would like to confirm that any plans for outdoor dining, parklets, any kind of change on Main Street go before Planning Commission for review. I understand the COVID craziness, but if you guys could please, this might happen again, right? We might find ourselves here again. So what is the plan for Main Street? Business is shut down. If you guys could come forward with a future agenda item and discuss how do we plan for the crazy times. Either needs to go before the Planning Commission or a committee or something of the sort. So if you guys could please bring it forward as a future agenda item to plan for the future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to item 15.1, Chief Wren.
Good evening. Not
Good evening, Chief.
By my counterpart over in the fire department, we are going to start submitting stats to the city council to get a glimpse on what we're experiencing during the previous month. If you look at your packet, you'll see stats for April with a comparison of 2019 to 2020, and then for May. it was an oddity. We're actually seeing increases in our call volume, even though we had a reduction in proactive service through the COVID-19, the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. So year-over-year comparison, April, we saw a 25% increase in our calls for service. And again, in May, we saw a 16% increase. Our guys and gals are busy. We want to give you a glimpse. This is since this is the first two stats we're making available to the council and public, we're open for suggestions on what they'd like to see. But I think it's important to highlight the work that the men and women of the Placerville Police Department are doing for the community, and just the amount of calls they're actually responding to on a monthly basis. If there's anything specific you'd like to talk about, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it for public comment.
I see no public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Chief. We'll look at. I think I'll go back and talk to my colleagues and see if there's anything else we'd like to see that comes up. That way we give it a little bit more thought and then come back to you with those either recommendations or requests. Thank you.
I'd like to just make a comment, please.
Yep.
I just want to congratulate Acting Chief Wren and all the compliments that you received. And I'm very, very proud of you and what you did for our community through all the trauma that we had. And I just want to say thank you again.
Thank you, Patty. It was definitely a team effort. I know I drug Cleve around with me the days leading up to it, and then the men and women of the Placerville Police Department. I couldn't be more proud of their performance. Just a fantastic group of public safety professionals.
Well said. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Chief Wren for these April and May, and I look forward to these in the future. This is a really excellent one-page report that we can show to any citizen. We frequently have heard, well, what does Placerville do for this group or that group? And this clearly outlines everything that the men and women in our police department do for our community on a monthly basis. So this great piece of statistical work. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you. So item 16, upcoming items. We have a few things here. Spring mosquito construction management amendment, our national pollutant discharge elimination system contract extension, trailhead plaque still coming forward on the memorial, and then sidewalk dining design guidelines and vegetation management ordinance updates. So some pretty big things coming forward for our next city council meetings. And with that, we will adjourn the open session of the city council meeting at 9:40 and go back into closed session.